from the worlds of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar. The December Dump.
Alright. What is Egret's nickname for Jon's penis?
Oh god, it's got to be something to do with him being a part of the Night's Watch. I don't know, but I bet it's something to do with that.
The snow cone.
It was fuck. that one's quite a shit one. I feel like you could do better with that one.
Oh dear. I think there's another one I saw around. It's like, why is Egret happy about winter coming? It's like, because she'll be 6 inches deep in snow. Something like that. I don't know.
See, that one was better. That one was a lot better.
Oh dear. Anyway, hello and welcome to the Game of Thrones Season 3 recap and rankings. As you can see, I got my new headphones now, and it feels like I'm being choked around the ears. It's very weird. I can barely even hear my own voice, so I have to take it off to hear myself. Otherwise, what I'm going to be saying is going to sound unintelligible. But yeah, we're going to be going through they're going to be talking about the series as a whole, season as a whole, sorry. We're going to be talking about all the characters. We're going to go through a bunch of categories that you can all vote in the straw poll, and we're going to be ranking the episodes as well, like we have done for the other season rankings. Isn't it just so sad that we're further through this than Jake is Doctor Who?
Take that, Jake. I'm way more available than you are.
And you're in a different fucking time zone.
I know.
13 hours behind.
Yeah, right now for me, it is 11:30 in the evening.
Yeah.
I'm currently in the dark. For this video, I'm in the dark, and my wall is red because I'm getting my whole room painted. So the background now, there's a red wall. But yeah, it's very late here. I finished work about 2 hours ago.
Oh dear.
My back is aching, but I'm ready to talk about season 3 of Game of Thrones. I'm ready.
Yeah. It's just wish it was Jake talking about series 3.
Same.
It's the one thing I've been wanting.
As much as I'm loving this show, I would love to talk about series 3.
Yep. Him and Adam. Oh dear.
Yeah, that when you guys eventually get to that, it will be very satisfying to talk about for sure.
Yes.
Like after series 4 is done, that is pretty much me done. I'll still watch, but in terms of everything that I want out of conversations about Doctor Who, that'll be like, yeah, that's my shit.
Yeah, I get a funny feeling. I don't know how Jake. I don't know what Jake thinks of fairy tales, but I know he definitely yearns for dark storytelling, and well, he's certainly not going to get that. He's certainly not going to get much of that in series 5 to 7.
Yeah, after series 5, you'll probably think it's something different. It's a nice.
He's probably
breath of fresh
I think
air.
Adam said
But then after that is when it's going to get old really quick.
I feel like what he said. Adam said that he might like the taste of series 8 because it's so just bleak, you know.
He probably might,
because
there's a possibility.
There's a one of the short films we did at school. He was an actor in, and the character he played was very similar to Danny Pink. And he won. Funnily enough, he won Best Actor at our awards.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, he must have been better than Samuel Anderson. Then.
Well, to be fair, he didn't have as much dialogue as Samuel Anderson.
That probably helped.
All he had to do was have a hot girl in class talk to him and just look nervous, which is easy for him.
Mm-hmm.
He says he wasn't acting. He was just he was just himself in the scenes. And then he had to like, well, I think in the film there's like a website where you like press a button and it commits suicide for you. I don't know. It's weird. I think it was plagiarized from something else, but whatever. That's a long story. I mean, Adam's film at South Seas was kind of like Midnight, except the ending was fucking weird. Anyway, we're blabbering on. But, yes, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/GenesisVandrazani. You can get full-length reactions of all the episodes of Game of Thrones. You can get early access to these reviews, including this one. We have a master tier we can request videos for us to do. So, at some point, if you want us to do topical Game of Thrones videos and you want to tell us, which ones you want, and, essentially, by joining the master tier, we sort of guarantee that you can request a video within reason. We also have a twitter.com/Giandrazani to get in contact with us. We also have a Discord server where you can chat to us, and there's a channel in there for video suggestions if you're interested in that. I also have a Letterboxd account where I review films. There's all that goody juicy stuff, really. But yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see how late this video comes out, because at the time of recording, I still haven't finished editing the pointy end reaction.
Yeah, that's how far ahead we are right now.
Yeah, so
as of time of recording. So we've done a lot of these.
Yeah,
and people have hardly seen any of it.
I've done more editing on the season 1 recap than the pointy end. Because I'm dreading getting to Baelor and Fire and Blood because there's no audio.
Yeah. But by the time people see this, that'll be long in the past.
It should be, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll probably be finished watching the show by the time this one comes out.
That's honestly a big possibility.
It is very possible.
I mean, hey, at least there isn't going to be a year delay. So there's that.
Yeah, I know.
Got a bit too real there for a sec.
Yeah. Jake's watching the show slower than it came out. Anyway, let's move past that. Let's talk about Game of Thrones Season 3. So,
yes,
your initial thoughts on Game of Thrones Season 3?
I thought it was really solid stuff throughout, and I think the season only really kicks into gear with the last 2 episodes. For obvious reasons. But this season I still think was actually really good. I think my main issues with it, there aren't that many issues I have with it, but I think all the stuff in these first 8 episodes feel like it's taking its time a bit too much for me, and then it really gets going with the last 2. But everything else I think is still quite solid. I just think what's disappointing me about this season is that it just feels like it could have been... Well, here's the thing, like you mentioned to me before we watched this season, these 2 next seasons, this season and now season 4, are part of one book. So that might be why I'm a bit iffy on it overall in terms of comparing it to the last 2 seasons. But overall, this season was still very good, well written. So a lot of decent and good episodes, with 2, I would say, like my 2 favourite episodes of the show so far. It's still a really good season, 100%. I just wish maybe it probably picked up the pace a bit earlier. I think that's my main issue. I think that's always been my sort of like method feeling with the show in terms of its pacing. Probably more with the last 2 seasons, because I think season 1 was paced actually probably pretty perfectly. I just think these last 2 seasons, I think the pacing it's not terrible, nowhere near. I just think probably I'd prefer it to be a little bit more, make it feel like we're moving along with the story a bit more. Especially, I think the biggest example of that would be Daenerys' story, because only till now, the literal last scene of this season is where her story actually feels like it's coming to a natural progression. It feels like she's a natural character with a motivation now. So I think that's an example of that, where I feel like the pacing probably could have done a lot more work to get me really invested in all these characters, to feel like it is going somewhere. But yeah, like I said, overall, I think this season was very good, with 2 incredible episodes at the end.
Yeah, the TV show suffers a bit from not having inner monologues, especially with Daenerys, because you don't really know what's happening until it happens. That's the problem. Whereas if you had inner monologues, you would get a lot of the stuff that you're wanting very early on, because you would sort of know for what people want and what people are thinking. But the problem is the show doesn't really tell you what's going to happen. They just sort of wait until it happens, and then it all clicks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it does create a bit of, I suppose it's not padding, because a lot of the stuff that happens is important. It's just that the perspective in your mind, it takes a long time for you to realize what's happening, because it doesn't really tell you. There's not really any exposition to tell you. So it can feel like it's dragged out, but it's not. It's just the way it's adapted.
Yeah, I think in a way it's sort of structured. I think the structure in terms of how the story unfolds and what gets revealed at certain points, and what points in the story get revealed, and where everything lines up. I think that could do a lot more work within this season. Because I feel like that. I don't think that there necessarily is padding, but I do think there are certain parts of the season that could have been sort of not cut out, but moved to other parts so that other stories could breathe a bit more.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, there is a bit of shuffling around, because they wanted to have certain things happen at certain times.
Yes.
And I think probably my biggest criticism is that there's a whole bunch of storylines where they do all the plot points, but we don't really see the in-between, which is odd considering it's a slow-paced season, because there's things that we don't even see. It's very bizarre, because if you think about the I think I mentioned in Second Sons about the Yunkai plot, about how we don't really get all the conversations that happened in between the events. They just happened. All the events just happened one after the other. So yeah, the focus is interesting. There's a lot of storylines and a lot of characters, and they're trying to juggle it all. And it kind of
this show has a lot of characters. It has a lot, and it has a lot of characters and a lot of stories to deal with within 10 episodes, which is a lot. But the writers can still obviously do it. It's just sometimes some stories suffer more than others. Yeah,
the problem is with that, though, is that if you put all of A Storm of Swords into 10 episodes, it would be fucking rushed. Because that's a huge book. That's a massive book. It's gigantic. And my god. Imagine if everything that happened in this season happened in the first 5 episodes. That would just be madness.
It would be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because especially when even within these 10 episodes, there are stories that are incredibly rushed.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously the biggest example would be the Daenerys story with what's his face?
Darren Harris.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, their story in terms of them meeting and then joining forces, I think, is incredibly rushed within his introduction. So if that was done in the first 5 episodes, that would be even worse, because it would literally just be 2 scenes.
Yep.
As opposed to 4.
Yep. Indeed.
Yeah.
You would have had to cut characters out of the story, which I wouldn't want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but having said that, the story itself, I think, is very solid. It's for the most part, it's a very, very soundly written story. It's just...
Yeah, this is still very well written.
I feel like maybe because I've seen season 4, it fits better for me because I have the full story in my head.
Oh yeah, that probably is a factor for sure. So it's like we get the perspective of obviously someone who has seen it and knows where these stories goes, if they work well. And for me, it's the here and now. Is this me feeling like these stories are actually going somewhere and it's a natural progression?
Well, I mean, just imagine like putting a book down halfway through and having to do a review on it. That's kind of what it's like. It's not,
and that is probably one. I think that is actually a really good point, because adapting this from one book and spreading it into 2 seasons, it can feel quite undercooked in terms of its overall story within this season. It could feel like you are in with his certain stories with characters. Feel like there's something missing. Feels like there's something that should have been shown. So yeah, it's interesting when you're doing adapting one book into 2 seasons. It'll feel something's like left undone, and you feel like that should have probably given more time to develop that story, so it could probably feel a bit more like it's actually progressing. Yeah, so I do think that when we get to next season, it will probably actually feel a lot more smoother. It'll probably feel like a lot more feeling like these stories are actually getting time to breathe and actually moving forward, and we get those natural conclusions.
Well, yeah,
so
because
why this season is going to suffer.
Because season 4 is the second half of A Storm of Swords, which means, I mean, it's the second half of A Storm of Swords, and most of that takes place post Red Wedding.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could have with season 4, you might have the opposite problem, where it's just too much chaos. Or it could work, or it could work in its favour.
It depends on what they do. It depends literally on what the story is. So, but yeah, it could go either way. But I think I would probably lean more towards it. Probably will feel a bit more. It will obviously feel conclusive because it's the second half of the book. But I feel like it will for the audience. For me, it will feel like, okay, this is where all these stories that have been building up for the last season. This is where the characters are going, this is where the narrative is going, and this is how we wrap it all up to then continue on to the next sort of chapter of this.
Yeah, I think it's
world.
Though I think it is quite fortunate though that when you read A Storm of Swords, around about halfway through the books, quite a lot of the storylines change, like in terms of a character being introduced into them or a location being changed. There's quite a few storylines that have that, so I think they're quite lucky about that. But yeah. So, shall we move on to the characters?
Yeah. Let's get on with the next 2 hours.
Yeah. Alright then, let's begin with Jon Snow.
He had a very interesting season because he found like something that he has never experienced before, yet still, even though he probably hated to do it, still turned his back on someone he very clearly cared about, and vice versa. I really enjoyed his story, and I really enjoyed his story with Egret. I think that's probably one of the highlights of the season. I think in terms of just characters, yeah, I enjoyed his story, and I enjoyed what he did this season, and I think it really feels like he's actually like in the same vein of Daenerys. Yeah, I do think Jon has more character. He felt like that he finally had something that we could like relate him, be like quite relatable for us. We understand truly like what his morals are. We just understand truly like who he is as a person to the core. What is like Well, not, I think the wrong word would be to use standards that I was going to use. I guess, like I said, his morals. We understand who he is. But I really enjoyed his story with Egret a lot.
He's also become more confident and more respectable. He's when he's around Egret, I noticed that Kit Harington's acting steps up a notch because they have really good chemistry. It's no wonder that they ended up marrying in real life. But yeah, like him, that whole scene at the beginning of the series with Mance Raider was fantastic. The way he manipulated everyone to believe he was a wildling. But then, of course, Egret knew he wasn't. But then she tried to, bait him with the whole thing of, well, don't betray me. And then he ended up doing it anyway. And I think my favourite scene from Jon Snow this season was it from episode 10, when he said, I know some things. But basically lays it down, we can't be together, I have to leave, I have to go home. I have to go home.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think his story was very... It's like, it's more of a character story than it is like a plot story within the whole world.
Well, to be fair,
way more to do with his characters.
To be fair, though, it does tie into the plot in the sense that Mance Raider is planning an attack, and he sent some of the wildlings to anal them, basically, to go to the other side of the wall. And so with that, with Egret obviously being there, there's also the main sort of character that's introduced this season that also dies. That's a big part of that storyline is Orell, who's the warg, and he wargs into birds. And
yeah, he was very interesting.
Yes,
I wouldn't say like he was a very like overall well-defined character in comparison to others, but I think in terms of explaining what these people are, like with him and Bran, I think it's very well implemented into the world. And I think using him to use doubt into Egret towards Jon, I think is done very well.
I like the fact that he was actually right about Jon. He wasn't just a lying, jealous
because
man.
In so many stories, you would get that kind of story, and it turns out that, for example, if Jon does actually turn into a wildling, in so many stories they do that, which is very cliche. So in this, it's like he's right because that's who Jon is. That's what we know him as. He's very loyal to where he comes from, and like who his friends are. He's a very caring person, and he'll do what he feels is the right thing, and he doesn't feel like doing this for the wildlings is the right thing, despite his love for Egret.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, and I think I agree with the whole thing of the fact that having Orell introduced as a warg, it then, when we find out that Bran is a warg, it sort of helps because we already understand what they are.
Exactly. It's the best way. It's one of the best ways to establish a concept within this kind of world.
Yes.
So we, as an audience, understand how someone who is skilled with it uses it, how it actually works.
We also have Tormund Giantsbane, who was also with them as well. I think with the great thing about Tormund is that he didn't really do anything wrong, and Jon didn't even do anything wrong to him, but the fact that Jon betrayed the wildlings, it causes Tormund to almost despise him because of that, even though Jon wasn't doing it with the motivation to betray Tormund at all. And I like the fact that, with Tormund's suspicions, it all comes down to the whole tribalism thing. It's got nothing to do with personal beef, because Jon doesn't have anything against him. It's just literally the fact that because Tormund's a wildling and Jon Snow's a crow, that they are on opposite sides. But Tormund, you can very clearly see, he likes Jon. He's like, I like you, boy. But and you can sort of think to yourself, you know, if there wasn't some like war between the wildlings and the crows, you can imagine that these two will probably be friends. But because of the situation they're in, it's tense.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they do have like a nice little like thing going on as the season goes on. And yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said.
Mm. Yes, he's played by an actor who actually got coronavirus.
Oh, that's a shame.
But I'm pretty sure he's recovered with no symptoms.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Should we talk about Egret herself?
Yeah, I guess we should.
You go ahead.
She was great. Her, like, the actress was fantastic. Her portrayal was fantastic. Her story was... Like, her romance with Jon is so convincing.
Yeah, it's probably... It's honestly... It's probably my...
defined.
It's probably my favourite romance in the show, to be honest.
It's definitely mine right now.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't expecting to... like, really enjoy Egret's character as much as I do. Like, I thought she'd be good, and I thought she'd be, like, serviceable in terms of the story with Jon. But she's such a well-defined character. Like, we know so much about her and what her morals are. Like Jon, but they're different. Yet, it's the saying of opposites attract, because they're so different people, yet because of the chemistry between not only the characters within the world and the actors, it's so well built up and so well defined. This romance is like so well built up to. Absolutely. And then you obviously get the final scene where they drift apart, yet it's such a heartbreaking scene for Egret and Jon. Jon doesn't show it. Like Egret. Like, that final shot of Egret is like, that is how you do like that sort of like heartbreaking moment in a performance. She's fantastic. She's one of the best side characters in the show.
I would agree.
And she is one of the best actresses in the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's brilliant.
She's fantastic.
Especially considering...
She's such a great character.
Especially considering the actress is so different from the character. She's a posh, like, southern lady. And she's playing this rough Scottish wildling. Like when you watch interviews with Rose Leslie, she's like, you know, I really enjoyed playing the character. It was a very good time, and obviously I met Kit on set, and it was, I really, really liked it. But then fucking Egret's like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Don't you betray me. Yeah, I thought she was very strong. I really liked her in Kissed by Fire, in the hot springs. I like how she sort of just basically she tempted him into betraying his vows. And of course, there's the whole thing of them climbing the wall as well. That was a very big moment. And then, of course, like we said, the betrayal.
Yeah. Yeah, overall her story was fantastic. And the actor and character are brilliant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know nothing, Jon Snow. The fact that he fucking says, I know some things, is such a satisfying end.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, love that scene. Love it. Then, of course, in the first, 3 episodes, because we didn't see him after that, was Mance Raider.
Yeah.
It was obviously the king beyond the wall, and he's going to light the biggest fire the North's ever seen. Yeah, so this is a tough one, because I think Mance Raider's a really interesting character. He just doesn't get much to do.
Yeah, he doesn't go beyond the first 3 episodes, and what we get is very little. But he does seem like, I assume we'll probably see him again, and for what they've done so far, he is a very intriguing character that you want to know more about.
Yeah,
because of how he's connected with the wildlings.
I love the whole backstory and the culture behind him. The fact that he used to be a crow and he ended up banding all these people beyond the wall together who would, beforehand they would have killed each other. They would have fucking eaten each other. There's free folk and thens and all the giants and all that. But because of this one man that they all voted for, in a democracy beyond the wall, they've all chosen to follow him because they respect him. And I love the whole thing around how they don't bend the knee beyond the wall.
Yeah.
It's great. He's a great opposite for Jon to meet. And I love the first scene with him is perfect. The fact that Jon thinks that Tormund is Mance Raider because he's sitting in the middle of the room waiting for him. But that's not how it rolls. And the fact that Mance Raider is just sitting in the corner like everyone else. And how Mance Raider very clearly makes it, that I am one of you. We are all one and the same and you've chosen to follow me. But I am just like every other one of you that is here right now. And I like that about him. He's such a different leader to everyone else in the world. I like how he represents like hatred of monarchy. He hates vows. He's very much a free thinker. He's but like at the same time he's not a villain. You can understand his motivations. He sees the flaws in the Night's Watch. You could almost say he's a bit like he's kind of along the same lines as someone like a Qui-Gon or a Count Dooku, where he sees the flaws in the sort of the dogmatic, tribe he was in.
The dogmatic view of the Jedi.
Yeah, and I like the fact that him finding out about the White Walkers just gives him a motivation to move south. So essentially, the motivation for the wildlings to attack the wall comes from survival. So it's not just beef, it's literally survival, which makes a lot of sense. So I think they really, really well established Mance Raider's character and his motivation. The only problem is that after that point he doesn't really appear, and that's a shame, because I think he's a really good character.
Yeah, I pretty much agree.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes down to the whole thing of screen time and having so many characters, having to balance them all out. But for the screen time that Mance Raider does get, I think he's fantastic. Yeah, there's only one other character in that sort of storyline that was Lord of Bones, but he barely gets any screen time at all. He's just a wildling that wears a mask that wants to kill Jon.
Yeah.
But also beyond the wall, we have Samwell Tarly.
Yeah, he had a very interesting, I would say, second half of the season. And especially after the beginning of this season, leaving off or continuing on from how it ended last. Yeah, his whole season was very interesting. It's weird because I actually think this season is probably his best season. I think quite easily, and I think we actually kind of get to know him a bit more in this season.
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that Gilly asks him so many questions because she's interested to find out.
Yeah.
What I like about it is that with Gilly and Sam, on one hand, it's very much a casual conversation about each other, and they want to know things about each other because obviously Sam and Gilly, you can tell they have a connection of sorts, which is interesting considering how different they are. Again, talking about like with Jon and Egret being polar opposites, Gilly and Sam are very much the same in the sense that Sam is one of the most intelligent people in the world who's read almost every book, and then Gilly is one of the least intelligent, but she's quite street smart in a sense. She's quite smart in regards to things like survival and just knowing practical things. But what I like about it is that she doesn't even know how to read. She doesn't even know what books really are. And yet Sam, it's like his favourite thing in the world is reading books. I like that So again, the whole thing of opposites attracting. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting little story for Sam. The sense that he sees his Lord Commander killed and he runs off with Gilly because he feels a responsibility to look after her baby. Of course, with that, he kills a fucking White Walker with dragon glass. Dragon glass that he dug up at the Fist of the First Men. Very brave. And then, of course, we get that scene where Gilly calls him a wizard, which is the one thing he always wanted.
Yep.
And then, of course, the big detail of him coming back to Castle Black, talking to Maester Aemon. And I think the moment where Gilly says that she's going to call her baby Sam is quite a big moment for him. Because they're talking throughout the season about what she should call her baby. And then he's like, don't call her Craster. Don't call him Craster. Don't call him Randall. And they have the one thing that connects them is that they have horrible fathers, but again, in different ways. Like Craster was a daughter fucking wildling bastard who would give his sons up for the White Walkers. And then, of course, Randall Tarly was an abusive father who bullied his son. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting little side story, honestly. And again, talking about like characters, it is very character focused, despite the fact that what I like about it is that it's not just character focused. Just they don't just halt the story to focus on the characters. It does fit into the plot because whilst they're getting to know each other, there is all this threat that's surrounding them. And the fact that they're having to keep on the move because Craster's Keep has been taken over, and because there's White Walkers, and winter's coming. I thought that was really cool. And then of course we get that meeting between Sam and Bran's storyline, which I thought was a really nice moment as well. So yeah, I thought Sam had a really interesting little story in season 3.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think John Bradley just plays that character so well. He has such a genuine sort of innocence to him, but an intelligence.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Beyond that, though, we do have one other storyline beyond the wall. And that was pretty much the death, or not just pretty much, it was. We saw a lot of tension because now Mormont knows about the White Walkers and he stumbled back into Craster's Keep again. There was a lot of tension around that because now both sides know exactly what's happening. But unfortunately for him, because he basically forced Rast to look after Sam, which is something that he definitely didn't want to be doing, and because Carl Tanner fucking despised Craster, and they ended up killing both of them. So now Craster and Gio Mormont are dead.
Yeah.
Which means that we are without a Lord Commander. So what's going to happen now? So yeah, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I remember commenting how his death, I think in the way it was actually done physically, was very odd. Like, he gets stabbed and he's alive for a bit and then he just suddenly dies, instead of dying instantly to really leave that impact. But yeah, in terms of the actual death, it is quite a big moment because I think he's been quite, like, in terms of being a mentor to characters like Jon, it leaves a hole within the wall.
Yeah, because now Mance Raider is going to be attacking the wall without Mormont there.
Yeah.
And of course, Craster is also dead, so now the White Walkers aren't going to have babies to take. Unless, of course...
Yeah.
Unless, of course, Carl Tanner and Rast impregnate them. Jesus. But yeah, you can sort of assume that they are holding Craster's keep. So what's going to happen there? Because now they're going to be halfway between Castle Black and the Wildlings, and then of course the White Walkers there as well. So you would have to imagine that, well, which side are they going to take? If the Wildlings attack, will Karltana and Rast take the Night's Watch, or are they going to take the Wildling side? And because Jon and Sam you would imagine, well, at least Sam's aware of it, Jon will probably find out what happened. You know, what are they going to do?
Once he recovers.
What are they going to do about that? Because they've literally got two of their men, or at least two of their men, have betrayed their side and killed their Lord Commander. Killed the person that was keeping the White Walkers at bay. So you have to imagine what the hell are they going to do about that? Because they're having a Wildling attack, they've got White Walker threats. It's all going on at the wall, isn't it?
It is. There is a lot that's going on.
Because there's Wildlings behind the wall as well.
Yeah. A lot of stuff going on.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a lot of chaos. A lot of chaos.
A lot of chaos.
Yeah. But do you have anything else to say about any of those characters in the Wall storyline, such as, Jill Mormont, Rast, Edison, Gren, Craster, Karltana, Maester Aemon, or Pip?
No, I don't really have that much else to say. I think overall, the Wall and Beyond the Wall stories, I think, were done fine enough, and I think the highlight being Jon and Egret's story. I think that was probably, without a doubt, that was the best aspect of that location within this season.
Yes.
But yeah. Other than that, everything else was decent.
Yes. So when we come back to the Wall in Season 4, obviously Alistair Thorne will be there, and without Mormont. So you got to imagine how is he going to deal now that Jon Snow and Sam are back. And also, like I said, there is also a character there now that has been sent to the Wall. And you can't seem to remember who it is.
No.
When you see who it is, you're going to kick yourself.
I probably will, yeah. I just don't remember. I just don't remember at all.
Because them being sent to the Wall was on screen. It wasn't off screen, it happened.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
God, it's crazy. Oh, it's going to be an interesting reveal. But yeah. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Alright then. Bran Stark.
It finally feels like we fully understand what his story within the show is going to be with this season. Because I think with season 1, I think it does a good job at establishing like who he is and where his character is in that point in time post accident. I think in season 2, the story with him and Theon didn't really. It was a story that was pretty much intertwined together, but it never really felt like Bran had real focus in terms of his character.
I'd say
now I feel like
I'd say the Maester Luwin, obviously Maester Luwin tied together those storylines quite well.
Yes.
But now that he's dead, he's sort of, and he's having to travel on his own, it's quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am glad that he finally feels like, and like Daenerys, but I would probably say he was a bit more well defined. But yeah, I think finally I feel like I'm glad that he's sort of getting like an actual story that I know is going to progress.
Yeah,
and I know what to expect.
I would say Bran is actually, he's a weird one because he doesn't actually have that much of a character. He's just he is a character, but it's very plot focused, and it's very revolving around a mystery.
In comparison with a lot of the other main characters within the story that had their fully fledged stories, that have had multiple events that have changed them, he's definitely on the weaker side for sure.
It feels his character in the story feels a lot more reactive than proactive, which is interesting considering what he becomes later, but we'll get to that. But he's a very reactive character in the sense that things happen around him, and that's what his character is. Is that his one motivation is to find the three-eyed raven, and then when certain things happen to him, like, finding out he's a warg, meeting Jojen and Mira, with Rickon leaving, and then of course all these other things that's happened to him, like Maester dying, Roderick being beheaded. Like it's all just reactionary for him. It was the same thing in season 1 with Ned dying as well, and then of course the big fall where he says, I'd rather be dead. It's interesting, and I think again, like with him meeting Samwell Tarly too, it feels very much like his entire motivation is based around this mystery of I need to find the three-eyed raven, and his entire character formulates purely based on him reacting to things happening around him, I feel.
Yeah, I would probably say so as well.
I think his storyline is one of those ones that it's a good one to have a thread through the series, because it doesn't need as much screen time. Like it's it's one that doesn't require as much development in terms of the characters. It's purely just plot points, which is interesting because they did a similar thing with Daenerys, but I feel like that didn't put the point across as much. I feel like almost like Bran storyline, you could have had like a little bit less screen time, and you could have had a little bit more with Daenerys' storyline, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because like someone could argue, well, if you didn't have those scenes, then Jojen and Mira would be not as interesting. But I'm like, the thing is, like with Jojen, is it's all in the visions and all in like him seeing potential futures and whatnot. And like even in the books, Mira's not really that much of a character anyway. So you could have, if need be, you could have sacrificed a little bit of that storyline to include more of the just sort of moral ambiguity, the conversations, the advising with Daenerys, because things like the Yunkai storyline needed her having conversations with Jorah and Barristan about it, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, but having said that, on its own, I thought it was a nice little story. But
yeah,
the thing is, like Bran's storyline is interesting. However, in terms of characters, he's probably not the most interesting character in it this season. I would say the two characters for me that are the most interesting are Jojen and Osha.
Yeah,
mainly because they both represent completely opposite sides of the equation, where Osha's entire responsibility is getting Bran to safety, and she doesn't want to go beyond the wall, and she tells that story about why, because she had to burn her own, her own lover alive because he turned into a white, and how that's affected her. And then of course with Jojen is like he sees the visions, so he knows that Bran has to go, and he has to take him there. I would say those two characters are the most interesting in that storyline.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Yeah, other than that, there's not much else with their sort of story. Yeah,
well, I mean, Mira's okay. She's sort of there to bounce off Osha in the sense of, like, Osha's got a bit of competition, and they do things differently. But there's not that much to a character.
For a moment in time, because of how mysterious those two are, she sees them as a threat. So yeah, it makes sense for her to react in that way.
There is an interesting detail in this story, though, that gets a bit unmentioned. But, I mean, obviously it's brought up, but the sort of questions around it are a bit weird, in the sense that they are the son and daughter of Howland Reed, who is someone who fought with Ned Stark in Robert's Rebellion. But it's not really, we haven't really found out why or how they left home, because we have no context of who Howland Reed and if he's even still alive or where he is in the world. Like that whole house never even gets mentioned at all. So it's a bit of a mystery around it. It's like, well, where does Howland Reed fit into this equation? Because, you know, you would think that if his son and daughter left home without them telling him, then surely, you know, he would have someone out searching for them. But then because they don't, you would have to put the equation in their head. Well, maybe Howland Reed knows that they've left. It's a strange one, actually. I don't really know what to say about it, because there's just this big question mark of what happened to their father. Like, where is he?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
I see what you mean.
And that question's not really answered, and it's like, I don't know. It's a bit of a mystery, and I'm not really sure what to say about it. Because in some respects, Howland Reed has quite a big connection to the story, but we don't really know who he is and where he is and why he's not looking for his children. I don't know. It's not really explained. But maybe at some point it will. Who knows?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Hodor's fun. There was that one scene where Osha's like, why do they get to sit around and talk while we do all the work? And then Hodor says, Hodor. And then, of course, there's a scene in episode 10 where he finds the well and goes, Hodor, Hodor, Hodor. I like that his purpose in the story is carrying Bran around because he's a giant. And Bran's a cripple. The only other character in that storyline is Rickon Stark. Who, is he even really a character?
No.
Not really.
No, he's not. He's absolutely not. He is the most nothing character probably in the show.
Yeah, he's sort of just, all we know about him is that he has these weird visions, like, but he can't quite comprehend them because he's too young.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he goes a bit insane and just runs off. But it's like, is it because is it because he's a child, or is it because he's just a bit weird? I don't know.
It's probably both.
He likes to crack nuts.
I like to crack nuts.
The only time we really get anything of substantial with him is when he has to leave.
Yeah, his final scene.
Yeah.
In this season.
Yeah, him and Osha and Shaggy Dog split. Makes sense for Osha. It's sad for Rickon because obviously he's having to leave his brother. But, like, Rickon, he's just not a character. He's just a child.
No, he's not. He's not a character.
He's literally, like, his only, like, fucking reason to exist is that he's a unreliable child.
Yes.
The most interesting scene he has in the whole show is when he says that he had the same dream as Bran about Ned dying.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the whole thing of, like, Bran saying, they'll come back, and he says, no, they won't.
Yeah, they won't.
But that was season 1. After that, he cracks nuts, and then this one, he just does nothing, really.
Yeah, it doesn't even seem like he knows what's going on.
Yeah, and in a way, that's kind of good, though, because, like, having innocent children just in the world it's something that would happen.
I guess.
But again, like, he's just not an interesting character at all. He's just a child.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, sure, you can have, like, characters that are innocent children, but that's not really anything. Like, I'd rather he be an actual character like Bran.
Yeah.
Because as bare bones as Bran is in comparison to some of the other main characters, he still very much has a character. Rickon is literally probably the most nothing character in this show right now. Like, I don't care about him. I don't
Fucking Meryn Trant has more of a character than Rickon.
Yeah.
Fucking Stannis' wife has more of a character.
Yeah, she actually does, because even she's only had one scene. Yeah, we know like quite a bit about her from that one scene. All I know from Rickon is that he likes nuts.
Yeah,
that's it. Like, there's nothing there. There's nothing to work with that. So I wouldn't say like, well, he's a child. He's just an innocent child. It's like, so he's still not a character.
Yes, I suppose it was like, do something with him or bin him. It made sense to get rid of him here because they're about to go beyond the wall as well. Like he's
exactly.
like
he would absolutely die.
Mm.
Like there's no question about that.
Yeah. And Osha doesn't want to, so it makes sense why she takes him. Okay, now we finally get to King's Landing, the meat of the plot.
Yay!
With a character who's been taken down a peg massively from last season in terms of status, but I would argue is still a very well written character and especially well acted, and that is Tyrion Lannister.
Yeah, he got absolutely shit on this season throughout the entire thing, and especially after like Blackwater, where he rallied people into pretty much. They thought they won it, but then
he was nearly killed.
But
he was nearly killed on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, and now he's got a shit room. He's got a wife that he didn't want, and has absolutely no power, and is like the master of coin, or whatever he was called.
I think one of my favourite little sort of storylines in this season is how him and Cersei bond. Because at the very start, Tyrion is suspicious that she tried to kill him on the field, and it's not really clear whether she did or not. But then when it's announced by Tywin that they're going to be marrying Loras and Sansa, they both share something in common. And then by the end of the season, they have that scene where she talks about Joffrey when he was a child, and it feels to me like him and Cersei are starting to really just sort of find common ground a bit, which is really fascinating. And I think part of that comes from the fact that Jaime is gone, the fact that Jaime wasn't there and Cersei has no one because he hasn't been there for 2 whole seasons now. Yeah, so to go from the start of the season with Tyrion is suspicious that his sister tried to murder him, to them having a genuinely like brother and sister relatable connection to each other at the end, is a very interesting story, I think. It's very subtle. It's very subtle, especially coming off last season when Tyrion sent her daughter away and she pushed him and all that. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating story, especially considering how complex it is, because Tyrion obviously hates Joffrey. He absolutely despises Joffrey. And Joffrey is Cersei's son. But the fact that Joffrey being so abusive to her and she knows it, and the fact that she can admit to Tyrion, she says, my son is a monster, but I still love him because of what he was when he was a baby.
Yeah.
She's basically saying to him, like, you don't know what it's like to have children. And the fact that he sort of comes to her and says, well, you're kind of right. I don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Their character dynamic is one of the most interesting in the whole story, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree that their dynamic is like quite intriguing this season, and what they sort of go through.
Yeah,
season,
I'll say
they're both practically sold off. Marry other people.
I will say it now, like in terms of books and show. All my favorite dynamics between characters, most of them at the very least. It's all of the Lannisters and the Baratheons that I find the most interesting characters in the story, because they have the most complex dynamics and the most complex backstories.
They do. I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Like, even Renly Baratheon is a really interesting character, despite the fact that he doesn't get that much screen time.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, when you think about in perspective of all of them, like Robert, Stannis, Renly, Tywin, Tyrion, Cersei, Jaime, Joffrey, they're all very interesting. Oh, Kevin's fucking useless, but we didn't even see him this season, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we didn't see him.
No, God. Maybe he was putting his finger in a child's ear.
Gross.
But yeah, I thought that storyline with Tyrion was really interesting. There's many others too with Tyrion. There's Bronn, there's Podrick, there's Littlefinger, there's Varys, there's Tywin, there's Shae, obviously, and also Sansa and Joffrey as well. So Tyrion has a lot to do with the season, with him taking down a peg and him having so many different interactions with all these characters. It's very interesting. He feels like the sort of heart of it. He feels like he's in the center of the web, if that makes sense. Very similar to how he was the center of the web last season, except this time, instead of being Hand of the King, he's nothing of the nothing. I mean, aside from being the Master of Coin, but what does that even really mean? The fucking crown's in debt. So Tyrion's been given the hardest job. But I think the standout for Tyrion this season, well, I think the two separate things for me that are standouts for him. Firstly, it's obviously the wedding, and especially the aftermath, the reception, with him getting drunk. That was great, and of course him refusing to rape Sansa. And the other storyline that for me is like a just fucking masterpiece of a highlight of this season is, it's essentially, I mean, it's threaded throughout, but the main one-on-one scenes we get with this storyline bookend the season. We get one in episode 1 and we get one in episode 10, and it's the storyline with him and his father. How in the first episode Tyrion demands Casterly Rock because Jaime is sworn to the King's Guard, and Cersei's obviously, she can't. And he says, Tywin says, I will find you a suitable wife, but you will definitely not be getting Casterly Rock because Tywin despises his son. And, says, you are an ill-made, spiteful little creature. And then that coming around at the very end of the season, when Tyrion says, is it really that hard to say honor the family when it all benefits you? And Tywin says, is it hard? Is it hard, is it? When you were born, I wanted to drag you into the sea and let the waves wash you away. But I didn't, because you're a Lannister. Those are two of my favourite scenes in the whole season. Those with him and his father.
Those are two really good scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, really like Tyrion this season. I mean, as always so far. Like, he's just... you can tell, he's such an important character to the story. Because he's always the centre of focus when he's around. And Peter Dinklage is one of the best actors in the show. Easily.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You got anything to add on to that? I suppose Bronn and Podrick I haven't talked about in terms of his storyline.
They really weren't a factor as in this season. Bronn more so, because Podrick's kind of like a side character who's kind of become a joke in a good way. Yeah, but Bronn, I don't know. I think he only appeared like a couple of times this season. He didn't appear that much. But yeah, with Tyrion, I agree that his story was very well done. It was definitely a taken down a peg kind of story for him, where we truly see the resentment of him by his father, and it's very well done, very well performed. Yeah, I think this season I definitely enjoyed his sort of journey of reality hitting him, I guess, with all the events around the world coming to a head.
There's quite a lot of tension with him and Shae as well.
Yes, there definitely is. Sometimes I felt that it was a bit odd in some places. Other times I thought it worked fine enough.
I think it's because the actress doesn't quite know how to... It's not that she doesn't know, it's just... It's possibly because of the language barrier. She's not very good at displaying deception. She's very straight to the point. If you know what I mean?
I think it's also because of what she's been established as, with she either will crack a joke about Tyrion being unfaithful, but then they'll have an actual argument where she'll say the same kind of things, but it's an actual argument, and then it becomes like quite it's not very clear what the actual like point of the scene is or what the motivation of the scene is. It can become very jarring because we don't fully understand.
I think it's probably because
from her perspective what
the actress,
she's saying.
because of the actress being German, there's a bit of a clash because she's very, very good at displaying the subtleties of her emotions on screen, but in terms of the dialogue, it's a bit different because you can just clearly tell that English is her second language, and she doesn't quite get all of the nuances of the dialogue, if that makes sense. It's very I don't really know what the word is, because she's such a weird actress to talk about, because I do genuinely believe she's a good actress. It's just the fact that she doesn't speak English as her first language that it becomes problematic. I don't really know how else to say it other than that. Because
I see what you're trying to say.
Any scene where she doesn't have to say anything, she's fantastic. Like the scenes where Tyrion tries to get her to get out the room because he has to talk to Sansa in private, she's really good in those. But then when you get a scene like where she's playing with Tyrion, she's having like a sort of sort of half argument with him. It doesn't come across as a half argument, it comes across as a real argument. And then she flips, and it's a bit like, oh, I didn't see that coming at all. I don't know how to say it other than that. It's a bit weird. Because it's weird, because I think she's a good character. It's just the executions, there's something about it that doesn't feel quite right. The other thing about it is, though, that I do really like, is that from Season 2 there's a shift of power. Because in Season 2 it was Tyrion fearing that she was staying with him for the money. And like it seemed like she had the power over him. And he was almost like saying like, don't ever leave me, please. Because he become attached to her. And we find, obviously in Season 1 we know the reason why is because of Tysha. The fact that he has so much grief over that Shay feels like a replacement for Tysha. But in this season there was a scene that kind of reflected the opposite, in the sense that Tyrion has come to the fact of he kind of wants her to go for her own safety because he cares about her, but he realizes that if she stays around too long he's going to lose her. And now Shay has become attached to him, and she doesn't want to leave without him. So there is a shift.
Yeah, there's definitely a story that's going to come to a head next season. And it wouldn't surprise me if next season brings an end to their story. If I was made to make a prediction, that I would say that their story is probably going to come to a close.
You reckon?
Possibly. Yeah, because I think they're sort of like hinting at it's starting to get really dangerous for Shay, because she almost got discovered by Cersei.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of Joffrey, the King's Landing is becoming more and more violent than it was before. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they wrap up their story, because I feel like it's because she's been a part of the show since the end of Season 1, so she's been here for quite a while now. No.
Yeah, but so yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about Shay, really, to be honest.
No, I don't have that much to say about Shay.
Yeah, obviously Sansa Stark was a big part of this season, in the sense of her thinking she was, now that Joffrey is going to marry Marjorie, she thought she was going to go and marry Loras.
Yes.
Because if you remember, at the very start of the season, Marjorie spends a lot of time bonding with Sansa over, come to Highgarden. Then, of course, you got the whole thing with Littlefinger, come to the Vale. All of these things that are going to make her happy. And then it all just fucking crumbles, and she ends up having to marry Tyrion.
Yeah, it's like ever since the end of season 1, her story has pretty much been her life is miserable, it's not what she thought it was going to be, and all her dreams are pretty much burning in front of her.
Yeah, I love the fact that they use. I love the fact that they use Loras Tyrell to almost bait her into the thing that she fell for in the first season.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that that begins in season 1, like in at the joust when she first sees him.
Yeah.
So it was introduced very early on. But I like the fact that she doesn't really know, because she isn't aware that he's gay. That the fact that he really doesn't give two shits about her. But then eventually they find a common ground in how shit the world has become because of Joffrey.
Yeah.
But yeah, she has to marry Tyrion, and then just when she thought it couldn't get more miserable, she finds out about the Red Wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, she's pretty much lost almost everybody in her life. Yeah, it's pretty much... It would surprise me if she felt like that her world was pretty much done now. That this is what the rest of her life is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody betray me. I'm fed up with this world.
Get out, motherfucker.
You're... Don't touch me, you bastard.
I treat you like a princess. How could you do this?
You know what they say, love is blind. On the note of...
It seems like you are the expert, Mark.
On the topic of Sansa, we probably should talk about Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, who was in the first half of the season, then left at the end of the climb.
Yeah.
What I like about this one...
His story was interesting.
What I like about this for Littlefinger is that with the first season, he had all the power. Season 2, he was taken down a peg and Varys took control. And with here, I love the fact that slowly but steadily, Littlefinger starts to become who he really is. We commented on how his accent has changed and how he's not putting on a facade anymore. And how he essentially lays it out to Varys of, my plan is to marry Lysa Arryn in the Vale, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And of course, Varys says, is this your plan to get on the Iron Throne? You know, I come here to stop all the chaos. Because chaos is a pit where everyone dies. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
Yeah. Yeah, like you mentioned, he is pretty much showing what his true colours are, who he really is as a person, how despicable he is, how horrible he is. And he's becoming more and more like an actual villain now, because he is, like you said, chaos is a ladder, so he's organising his chaos so that it could benefit him.
Yeah, and he's been planning since season 1 to marry Lysa Arryn.
Yes.
Which is interesting, because what happened at the beginning of season 1? Who died?
Oh, Ned died at the beginning.
No.
End of season 1.
Who died? Who died at the beginning of season 1?
I'm trying to remember.
Lysa Arryn's husband, Jon Arryn.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So I find it interesting that straight after Jon Arryn's death, Littlefinger capitalizes on that.
Yeah, because that's who he is. I think that's what we came to learn about him.
The fact that he sees,
within these 3
well,
seasons.
now there's an empty space there. You know, the Vale doesn't.
Yeah, this is his opportunity.
The Vale does not have a male lord. And especially now that Robb and Catelyn are dead and Ned's dead, the Starks are not controlling the North. The North is being controlled by the Boltons. So now him going to the Vale is a lot more safe for him, isn't it?
Yeah, right now it is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yes, he discovers that Ros betrayed him to work with Varys and had her killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, very interesting, I think. Very interesting season for Littlefinger. Bouncing back.
It definitely was.
I think the one thing that I, from here on, would be thinking about is what happens when he finds out about the death of Catelyn.
Yeah, that will be interesting, actually.
Because, obviously, Littlefinger loved her.
Yeah, will he have a moment of, grief?
Mm.
A brief moment of grief.
Yeah, and, if he knows about the Red Wedding now, is that grief going to happen off screen?
It might.
Mm.
It's not gonna. It won't. I was gonna say, are we gonna get a Luke Skywalker situation of him mourning, but we don't see it. But I don't think it wouldn't be as bad as that.
Mm.
Nowhere close.
It's an interesting question to ask. It's hard to say with Littlefinger because, unlike some other characters, Catelyn's not his only motivation. In fact, it's not. It's not even his.
Clearly.
It's not even his primary motivation either.
No.
Mm. Yeah, a very interesting thing to think about, isn't it? But yeah. Do you have anything else to say on Littlefinger?
No, I definitely think this is probably the least amount we've got of Littlefinger, but we did get a lot of good stuff at the very least.
Mm. There is a bit of trivia about Littlefinger, but I can't say it now. I'll say it when it becomes applicable. But there is there is trivia about a particular thing in this season, and in my opinion, it's quite unfortunate trivia. It's not something I particularly like, but yes, I will reveal it once it becomes. Once I can tell you. But there is something about this season that I suddenly realised recently that made me very sad. Yeah. Anyway, shall we move on?
Sure.
Actually, no, before that, are you looking forward to seeing if or when he appears in Season 4? Obviously, his plan is to go to the Vale, to the area with Lysa Arryn, so are you intrigued at that storyline if it pops up?
Oh yeah, for sure, because it's involved with Littlefinger.
On the other side of that coin, we obviously have Varys.
Yeah.
He doesn't appear. He doesn't appear for the first few episodes. He appears for the first time. I think it's like episode 3 or 4. He first appears, and we finally find out the story about how he was cut, and the fact that he keeps that man in a fucking prison, in a box.
Yeah, I remember.
Mm.
I like that little character moment for him.
Yeah, and once Littlefinger leaves King's Landing, Varys sort of takes over the storylines a bit. He's become...
Yeah, he does.
He's become part of the small council, although he was before. Well, actually, no, yeah, you're right. He was from the start. But that's sort of his role, and a lot of his... We obviously got that scene, episode 10, with him trying to convince Shae to leave, and she believes that Tyrion tried to convince him to do it.
Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, and I enjoyed it.
Yes, and I like the whole thing of Ros telling him about how Littlefinger but his plan to go to the Vale. That was good. So now Varys knows what Littlefinger's up to.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Yes. You've also got to ask yourself the question with all this shit that's been going on, especially like with the Red Wedding. Does Varys know anything about this? And did he?
I probably would assume so. He had an inkling, but there wasn't probably much he could do.
Yes. I can't actually really remember.
Like he says, he keeps to the shadows.
Yeah, I can't actually remember much more about him, to be honest.
Yeah, he doesn't appear a whole lot, like Littlefinger.
I don't remember what he does like around episodes 7 and 8. I don't really remember.
I don't think he appeared.
I think he's at the wedding.
Yeah, he's probably at the wedding, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, beyond that I really can't even remember, to be honest. Oh! No, he does have one other scene, I forgot. He has the scene with Olenna Tyrell when they're talking about Joffrey.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. That is
pretty much it.
That is the one other detail. Yes. But apart from that, I don't really have anything else to say about Varys.
No, I don't have. Yeah, I don't have that much else to say.
Yes. We also have Grand Maester Pycelle, who had his most important scene cut. It was a deleted scene with him and Tywin.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. I thought his little moments that he got were really good. He isn't a character that particularly develops, but he does have his little moments, and I think the way he spites Tyrion and the way he ass kisses Joffrey is really interesting. And
yeah, it's his whole facade is very intriguing.
Yeah, and you almost get the feeling that like people around him are starting to realize that it's all a facade, you know?
Possibly.
I mean, Tywin definitely.
I think sort of like
because
I think it's more of like the intelligent people sort of understand like the way he sort of talks it doesn't seem real. But I'd imagine people like Joffrey wouldn't have any inkling to that because he is getting praise from him.
Oh yeah,
because that's the kind of person that Joffrey is.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously his biggest scene was deleted.
Yeah, it was.
I think the most interesting thing now is that Qyburn is in King's Landing, going forward.
Yeah.
Because Qyburn was a banished maester. So you've got to imagine that Pycelle is going to look at this man and think, "Oh, good heavens, no! Witchcraft!" This man is unsuitable. You cannot, dare not use him. You must send him away. Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed the deleted scene that we saw.
Yeah, the deleted scene was good. Just wish it was actually in the show.
Yeah. Also weird to see Tywin Lannister in his element, like fishing.
Yeah, not wearing the clothes that he normally wears.
Yeah. We've mentioned Roz. There was a very brief bit of screen time with Meryn Trant, but he was hardly in it at all. So I suppose we will have to move on to Joffrey Baratheon.
Yeah, he is like the same despicable character he always is. I think every season he sort of amps it up and becomes more and more despicable.
I love his scenes with Tywin and Tyrion, especially. I love the scene at the reception where Joffrey's trying to escort them to, consummate the marriage, and Tyrion sticks the knife in the table. That was fantastic.
That was really good.
Yeah, and I also really like the scene when he's sitting on the Iron Throne and Tywin Lannister walks up to him and says,
"Oh yeah, that was good.
We could arrange to have you carried."
Yeah, that's really good.
And then, of course, I believe it's in episode 10 after the Red Wedding, when he says, "I'm gonna have Robb Stark's head on the table at my wedding," and Tywin tries to get him to go to bed, and he says, "I'm not tired."
Yeah. That was interesting stuff.
Yeah, I really feel like Joffrey. All the scenes he appeared in were really good scenes. They're sort of gems,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I especially like the storyline of Marjorie manipulating him as well. That was fantastic. The fact that she's sort of teaching him how to be a man of the people, wave to the crowd. And then, of course,
to sort of appease his horribleness.
And then there's the scene where he teaches her how to use a crossbow as well. I loved that scene.
Yeah, that's such a weird and interesting scene that was. I remember.
Yeah, and then of course he kills Roz as well.
Yeah, very brutally.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, with all the scenes Joffrey appeared in, I thought they were really, really good scenes.
Yeah.
And man, just fucking hell, Jack Gleeson is so good.
He is.
Yeah. But yeah, we've got the wedding to look forward to. We've got the wedding between Joffrey and Marjorie to look forward to for season 4.
Yay!
We're gonna have an episode dedicated to Joffrey.
Yay!
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah. But yeah, anything else you want to add on for Joffrey this season?
No, he was just pretty much the same, like, twat he always is. And it's the progression is like, it's very natural. Like, he gets worse and worse every time you see him, and the things he does get worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm. With Joffrey comes Marjorie Tyrell.
She's great.
She has most of a presence in the first half, I think, of the season. I think in the second half she takes a bit of a sideline.
I agree.
But for the first sort of 6 or 7 episodes, she's mainly featured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think she's a great character.
I agree. I think her sort of like not tricking, just like the way she uses her words with Joffrey is like very cleverly done.
Yep. I think one of my favourite scenes with her is the scene she has with Cersei at the wedding. When Cersei talks about the Reigns of Castamere. Obviously that linking to the next episode. But then how she basically subtly says, talking about how House Lannister once took down the second richest house, and now the second richest house is the Tyrells. And she says, if you ever call me sister again, I'll have your throat cut in your sleep.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really interesting story arc for Marjorie, in the sense that the entire time she was manipulating people, and then right at the very end, Cersei, got back at her.
Yeah. Yes, good stuff.
Very good. And the way she manipulates Sansa as well, pretending to be a friend. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, very good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, her brother, Loras Tyrell, appeared not as much, but he appeared somewhat. There was obviously that storyline with him and Oliver, how Littlefinger arranged for one of his male whores to get information out of Loras.
Mm-hmm.
But with Loras, it's sort of like... I love that scene at the wedding where he's been befuddled by Olenna laying it all on the table, or who's marrying who and who's going to be related to who. And then he just fucking walks up to Cersei and tries to have small talk with her. And then she just completely just blasts him. That was so funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, Loras Tyrell. I think the one criticism people had was that there wasn't really much reference to him grieving over Renly Baratheon. Yeah, I will say, like, his character hasn't really progressed that much. It's just he seems more like he's just sort of involved in the plot, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He's an important figure, but he doesn't have as much to do this time round. But, however, on the flip side of that, this season we were introduced to their grandmother, the Queen of Thorns, Olenna Tyrell.
Mm-hmm.
I love her. I think she's fucking hilarious.
She is very funny.
Yes, but she's not just comedic relief. She's actually a very good character.
Yeah, she's pretty good.
I like the way she's scouting everyone, and how she's kind of the master plan behind Marjorie.
Yeah,
and
I think they do a good job at sounding that for sure.
Yeah, she's kind of almost like a lady Tywin Lannister, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Not quite as powerful, not quite as ruthless. She's a lot more sort of, I don't know how to say it, but she's fierce, but she's not, she didn't fucking organize the Red Wedding. But she definitely has her way with people, and she's definitely a very good negotiator. And I love the way she can always see through bullshit, like with Sansa and Varys. She can't be manipulated. She sees the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that scene with Varys where she says what happens when the non-existent bumps up against the decrepit.
Yeah.
She's very brutally honest, and that's where her humour comes from.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But again, like her dynamic with Tywin Lannister as well. I love that scene where she says, you're a man that lives up to your reputation. Yeah. I really like Olenna Tyrell.
Yeah, I enjoy her character.
Mm. It's funny because I watched the Crimson Horror yesterday, so she was in that. The Crimson Horror. She's very brutally honest in that one as well. She doesn't give a rat's ass about her blind daughter. But yeah, Olenna is fantastic. Thumbs up. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
So we've touched on Oliver, Bronn, Podrick, Meryn Trant, and Ros, which means there is only one more character to talk about in King's Landing. I thought I'd save the best for last. That's Tywin Lannister.
He's great. Every scene he's in is great.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of the best performers in those scenes.
Yeah. He was... I love the arc of him writing all those letters in the background of the season, and how we find out in the end what it was, that he was orchestrating the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
So brilliant. So good. And his scenes with Tyrion are some of my favourite in the show. Him essentially laying it down why he hates his son, but why he kept him alive. Why he'll never give him Casterly Rock. Him forcing Cersei to marry Loras, Tyrion to marry Sansa, and then of course the arrangement of Joffrey and Marjorie as well. Him ruling everyone because of his family name. The fact that he won the Battle of Blackwater, took Tyrion down a peg, no congratulations at all. He's fantastic, and he has some of my favourite scenes in the whole season. The scene with Olenna, the scene with Cersei and Tyrion, where he says, "You are my daughter! You will do as you are told and marry Loras Tyrell." And then, of course, the scene with Tyrion, him saying, "You will not bring that whore to court" in Season 1. And then, of course, Tyrion says, "You remember the last time what happened when I was married?" And he says, "All too well." And then I also love all the scenes with Joffrey. Those are fucking great too. I've said it before, Tywin's my favourite Game of Thrones character. As a whole, when you think about the whole show and the entire perspective of all the characters, he's my favourite character. I love him. Charles Dance was perfect casting. Every scene he's in is great. He's the most consistent character. There's not one moment in anything Tywin's done from the start to this point that I can point out and say there's something wrong with that, because there isn't. It's just everything with him in it is fantastic. Every scene, every performance, every story beat, it's just fucking phenomenal. I love him. He is one of the best executed characters from book to screen I think I've ever seen. Like, he plays his role so well. They recede his screen time when they need to, but when he appears, it feels meaningful, purposeful. He has such much power in the world, orchestrating the Red Wedding, winning the Battle of Blackwater. And just, man, he's fucking great. Absolutely brilliant character he was.
I pretty much agree with all of that.
Mm-hmm. He is the ultimate power in the world, Tywin. I love the way he subtly suggests of, like, you know, it's like there's a boy on the throne, but what wins wars? Gold wins wars. You know, he's a war commander. And he has some of the most quotable lines as well. Like, another one that I haven't mentioned yet is, anyone who has to say that they are the king is no true king. It's just fucking hell, man. He's a very quotable character for a reason. And just everything with Tywin is fantastic. Molto bene.
Yeah.
You got things to add to that?
Not really. I think you said pretty much all of it. Like, he's a really good character. He's a great actor, and all the things he's in, he's the best part about those scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they do such a good job with his character.
Yep. He's a bloody legend. This next part is going to be quite deflating to talk about, because it's one of the characters that I feel had the most potential, and from what I've read from the books, he's one of my absolute favourites in the books. However, with the TV show, we ran into a few roadblocks in terms of the writing around his character. That, of course, is Stannis Baratheon.
Yeah, he pretty much is a non-factor in this season. Like, I remember, like, anything this season he did that was, like, amounted to anything towards any story.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a passive character.
Yeah. And that's because in the books, at this point in A Storm of Swords, his entire character is based around his character growth and his development and the way he changes as a person. Because he lost the Battle of Blackwater, he starts to become tempted by the Red Woman, resorts to dark magic, kills Edric Storm, and then is alerted about the White Walkers, and is about to go to the Iron Bank. It's all about his character evolution at this point, but the problem is in the show they changed him to where he was already obeying the Lord of Light at the start of Season 2. So he becomes completely static, which is fucking annoying, because Stannis Baratheon is one of the most intriguing characters in the whole story, and he feels so sidelined. And sometimes from, like, appearance to appearance, like you said, he feels like a completely different character. Like in Walk of Punishment, he's a creepy pervert that wants to, like, fuck the Red Woman, and he seems evil. And then you get to Kissed by Fire, he seems like a really sympathetic father who just wants to find his purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a mess.
Pretty much it.
It's a mess, and I'm really, really pissed off at D&D because they wasted one of the best characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, legitimately, like, he's just... Stannis Baratheon is so good, but he doesn't really get that much to do, really.
No, he doesn't.
And I really don't like the whole thing around, like, because they didn't want to kill Gendry, they just got rid of him. Like, they just had him row away, so Stannis is like, I will have you executed, and then Davos is like, but you need me, and he's like, okay then.
Yeah, it's really dumb.
Like, think about this.
Gendry's escape bugs me the most.
Yeah.
About that.
Like,
the aspect of that episode.
Wouldn't it be so much better, if this season was about him being tempted by the dark magic of the Red Woman?
Yeah, because it would make sense.
Him building to burning Gendry, and that, like, that death being what inspires him to make his next move. if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The fact that he killed his nephew, you know, he's not only killed his brother, but he's now killed his nephew as well. And the fact that Davos Seaworth, you know, is starting to see him, you know, just making all the wrong steps. God, it's so much potential left on the table. And it's fucking annoying because Stephen Delane is great. He's so good.
Yeah.
Like, I love that scene with him and Davos in the jail in episode 7.
That's the dialogue in that scene. Is like,
sorry, it was episode 8, I think, not 7. Yeah.
The dialogue in that scene alone is like some of the best dialogue in the show.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, Jesus. I think I've heard rumors that like Dave and Dan don't really care about Stannis, which is a fucking shame because he's one of the best characters.
Yeah, it really shows.
Yeah. Like imagine if we got like the same storyline in season 2, but he was a sympathetic character and he wasn't trusting in the Red Woman. He was much more on Davos Seaworth's side. And him killing Renly Baratheon took a lot of convincing. Like, he was essentially like, I can't do this. But then he realizes it's the only chance he has of winning Blackwater. And then, you know, that whole scene at the end, him saying, I killed my brother. You know, that would have so much more impact. And then the fact that, you know, that whole time in season 2, he is a character that we feel sympathetic towards. We feel like we can relate to. Then eventually, over the course of season 3, he slowly turns into what he is now. Imagine how much more interesting that would have been. Ugh. Fuck's sake. Oh, man. This season has bits of pieces of a good story for Stannis, but they don't feel like they connect properly.
Yeah.
One thing that I was quite gobsmacked about this season that I never realised before is that his wife, Selyse, only has one scene. She appears in Kissed by Fire once, and that's it. But the one thing about this storyline that I really liked was Davos Seaworth and Shireen Baratheon. She didn't get as much screen time, but mainly Davos Seaworth for me was the shining light of this storyline, with him returning to Stannis despite the fact that Salador Saan suggested that he would be killed for it. And he very nearly was. But him...
Yeah, I agree. I really liked that little story that they had.
Yeah, I really liked the whole storyline of Davos being imprisoned and then being taken out of jail again.
Yeah.
The only thing that's a bit weird about it is the Gendry part.
Yes. That is... Like, it bothers me so much how easy it is to just get Gendry out. Like, it makes no damn sense for no guards to be there guarding him, who is... Stannis literally just said he was going to execute him. So... But yeah, it's...
But having said that, despite the fact of how they've messed with Stannis' character, Davos Seaworth is still very well done, I think.
Yes, he is.
His point of view in the storyline is still the same, and it still makes sense. And the reason why he's so easy to write into the story is probably because he has the point of view chapters in the books for Stannis' storyline. He's definitely the most well-defined character in the storyline, I feel. And I really, really like him.
Yeah, all the scenes of him trying to read are like really fun to watch.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Oh dear. But yeah, I think Davos is a fantastic character. It's just a shame that the storyline around him wasn't as good as it could be. Let's talk about Melisandre, aka the Red Woman.
Yeah, she's such an odd character, because this season she was pretty much involved with the Stannis aspect of the story, which, like we just discussed, is kind of shit. So her being associated with the story and being a main factor in that story is like, it's it's really hard for me to be like, yeah, I enjoy her.
I think the most interesting part of her storyline is when she goes to the Brothers Without Banners. Because we get a meeting between two different people. Well, not just two different people, but Red Woman and them, they both worship the same god. I thought that was quite interesting. When she meets Thoros of Myr and Beric Dondarrion. That's probably the peak of her storyline, but whenever she's at Dragonstone, it's like...
It really is underwhelming.
Yeah.
It's...
Again, they should have just fucking killed Gendry. That would have made it so much better if they just killed him. Like, if they literally just had her convince Stannis to kill him, that would have been so much better. Ugh.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against that. Like, the only thing I'd probably say is, like, because Gendry, I feel like you could get maybe more out of him, but...
Well, that's the thing.
That probably would have been better for him.
But that's the thing, though. Gendry doesn't go to Dragonstone in the books. It's Edric Storm. He's a completely different character. It's just they morphed them into one because they basically have the same role. They're a bastard of Robert Baratheon, I think. Or at least, I think Edric Storm might be a bastard of Stannis Baratheon. I'm not even sure. He's one of them. He's a bastard of one of the Baratheons. Probably Robert. But, yeah, it's just fucking... Again, I've said this before, I feel it's like a fucking broken record, but... This season should have been the Red Woman turning Stannis to the Lord of Light and having him burn one of the bastards. That's what it should have been, but it wasn't, because that's not what happened. It was an anticlimax. Gendry just escaped. And we got the whole thing with the leeches, I suppose. But
that was the only part that was like okay at best.
Yeah, it's irritating to think about.
It is really irritating.
Yeah, like this is like as we talked about in season 2, how the Karth was definitely the weakest storyline. I would say Dragonstone was the weakest this season.
It is definitely one of the weakest.
Which is really annoying because Dragonstone was one of my favourite storylines in season 2.
Yeah, it was really well done last season, and this season it's the complete opposite.
Mm-hmm. The best I can say about the Red Woman is I really like the scenes where she meets Thoros and Beric, and funnily enough, she has the scene where she like foreshadows something for Arya, which definitely isn't in the books because she never goes there. And yeah, that's about it really. The actress is good, but it's just nothing to talk about.
The actress is fine.
Yeah.
It's the story.
Yeah, it's just literally how the story ends. It's a problem for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
Which is interesting because you gave that episode a 10. But yeah, anyway. It's just a fucking mess, really. It's just a shame, really, because you didn't even need to change that much. You literally just have Stannis be slightly different of a character and kill Gendry. It's all you have to do, and it would have worked. Like, much better.
It's quite an easy fix.
Yeah. If you just have it about Stannis' character development evolving into being tempted by the Lord of Light and have him kill Gendry, this entire storyline is completely different. It probably works far better.
Yeah, most probably, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't have anything else to say about the Red Woman.
No, I don't either.
Salladhor Saan, Selyse, and Shireen are the only other ones to talk about. Salladhor Saan and Selyse only got 1 episode each.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shireen got 2.
I don't remember much about them. Or what they did.
Shireen has a bonding with Davos Seaworth. And it's very clear that Selyse doesn't approve of her daughter. Not only because Selyse wanted to breed a son for Stannis, but also because her daughter has grayscale, which is like a condition, or at least it's been healed, so she's not going to die, but she had it, and it's like a scar on her face. But despite that, she's just a genuinely nice young child. I like the scene where she says, what are the guards going to do? Put us in prison? I like her little bonding with Davos Seaworth. That was nice.
Yeah, that was nice.
And I like her scene with her father, with Stannis Baratheon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I want more, but I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, very undercooked, underwhelming.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the storyline that intertwined with the Dragonstone one, with Arya Stark.
Yeah. Arya this season, she's now lost pretty much everything, and she's transitioning into a killer because she keeps developing her list, and that's a big part of her character right now. Yeah, I'm enjoying the slow, relatively slow build of her character. I think that, like, her reaction in the final episode, seeing Rob's body was, and the death of the direwolf.
Grey Wind.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, like, that moment right now, and it's a rough one.
Mm-hmm. Obviously,
It's a really rough one to watch.
She ends up murdering the man that did it out of vengeance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like the I said it in the review, but I like the moral ambiguity around her now that she's become a killer.
Yeah, pretty much.
But you can understand why she's become a killer. It's because she seeks vengeance.
You understand. Why?
Yeah.
It's like you don't. It's like you don't have to, like, agree with her, like, killing all these people, but you understand why she's doing it. You understand.
Yeah.
Makes sense for her.
There was
'cause
also
she's pretty much lost everything in her whole life.
Yeah, there was also a lot of transitioning for her this season because she had to say goodbye to Hot Pie and Gendry, and she ended up being captured by the Brothers Without Banners, Thoros Angai and Beric mainly, and then ended up lining up with Sandor Clegane, who ends up capturing her, taking her out of the Brothers Without Banners to try and sell her back to the Starks, but they all die, so now they're together, and you don't really know where they're going to go from here. But I really like the sort of building of their connection, you know, between the Hound and Arya.
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested to see where their story goes next, especially after all that's happened this season, for all the world-changing events.
Yeah, I think the Hound is definitely a highlight for me with the storyline, because the main reason being, I would say, he played quite a big role in some of my favourite episodes, which is kind of spoiling the ranking, but I loved his sword fight with Beric in Kiss by Fire. It meant so much for his character, him having the fear of fire, and also the fact that he's fighting the people that are trying to kill the Mountain as well, despite the fact that he hates his brother, is a very interesting dynamic. Then you've got the fact that he tries to sell Arya back to the Starks for the Red Wedding, but then because of the Red Wedding he has to take her away from it. And then there's the whole thing around, like, how he goes around just killing people so he can steal their stuff, and Arya's trying to stop him. It's interesting. It's very interesting. It's interesting. I think he's definitely become more of a character now that he's left Joffrey. That because his arc from the first 2 seasons was building up to him leaving Joffrey, basically. You know, fuck the king, fuck the king's guard.
Yeah.
I like how in this season, I like the fact that it makes sense why he was captured by the Brothers Without Banners, because they're looking for the Mountain.
Yeah.
And because the Mountain doesn't even appear at all in this season at all. He doesn't appear. So and it's interesting because it was the reverse for season 2, where we never saw the Brothers Without Banners. They were in the background, but we saw the Mountain. But this time round, it's the reverse, where we're seeing the Brothers Without Banners, but not the Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought the Hound was really good. I thought he was really good, actually.
Yeah, I enjoyed him
Yeah.
for what he did.
Yeah. Gendry, though. Ooh.
He did pretty much nothing.
The Brotherhood storyline was fine, but once he... And I do like the scene where they go past King's Landing and Melisandre tells him about how he is the son of Robert Baratheon. I do really like that scene.
Like that.
But then it's once he gets to Dragonstone that things go a bit pear-shaped. Because the Leeches scene, yes, it's a good scene, but the storyline's not conclusive because he just rows away.
It doesn't feel like he really actually learned anything. Post learning he's the bastard son of Robert. It's like, I don't think Gendry's ever been like a well-defined character, but he at least had stuff to do and at least like developed somewhat in the last 2 seasons. In this season, he pretty much...
Well, to be fair, in season 1, he's barely in it. He's sort of just there as a device for the Jon Arryn murder.
Yeah, but then that goes on to like a somewhat interesting story of him.
Definitely season 2, he's quite good in that. I would say my favourite scene with Gendry is the one where he says he's going to stay with the Brothers Without Banners in the climb, and it's the scene with him and Arya. It's a very emotional scene, and I really like the acting in that scene. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, other than that, I was quite disappointed with Gendry's story this season.
Well, yeah, with how it ended, certainly. He's just rowing. He's going to row to Flea Bottom, and logically you'd think Stannis would want to look for him, right?
No, of course not.
Oh, what a mess. Anyway, hot pie.
I was thinking you were going to say it as a joke. I don't know what... I knew the next thing you were going to say was hot pie for some reason. Yeah, with hot pie, I think his story was really satisfying to watch. His last scene, I think, was episode 2.
3. That's episode
3. 3. Oh, 3. Yeah. I'm sorry. Episode 3. I don't think I've ever seen a more. I can't stop smiling. I can't do it. Fuck. I was trying to do that without laughing, and I couldn't do it.
How does it make you feel that the showrunners care more about hot pie than Stannis Baratheon?
Oh god. I really tried to get through that without laughing.
What was that? It was so weird.
I don't know. I was gonna literally say I couldn't have imagined a more emotional and heartbreaking goodbye to a character that we've all known and gotten to know really well, and whose story ended so.
I suppose in a way though,
satisfyingly.
apart from that, I do like the fact that it started out with Hot Pie bullying Arya, and then it ends with him sort of, being nice to her, giving her, she's like, I made you something. I made something that I tried to make look like a wolf, but it doesn't, because he's not an experienced baker yet.
Yes, that's nice and all, but it's when you play the scene as if it's on the same level or as Catelyn and Robb mourning Ned's death. Because that's how that scene is sort of played as. It's so dumb. Like, why?
I will rescue the flower, and then we will eat them all.
Like, just why?
I don't know.
He wasn't like a real proper character. He was just like comedic relief, and that was all he was. So I don't get his final scene. I don't get it. I don't get what the director and the writers were going through their heads. Like, legit. Why? Why would you waste Winterfell on a scene like that? It makes no sense to me. It's fucking hot pie.
To be fair, it wasn't Winterfell.
What was it?
It was, you know the place where Tyrion got arrested by Catelyn in season 1. It was that place, I think.
No, I'm talking about the music.
Oh, you mean the theme? I thought you meant the location.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't Winterfell.
Yeah,
the song they used, I believe, was Winterfell.
I think so.
Like, how dumb is that? Again, like I just said, they used the same piece of music, or at least the same theme, as when Rob and Catelyn mourned Ned's death. And they used it for Hot Pie's goodbye. He's gone off to go and do some cooking and do some good. Let's play the most emotional track in the show.
Speaking of like weirdly fitting music, I was watching the Crimson Horror yesterday, and the silence theme was in it. Like, you know, the grrrr.
Really?
Yeah, like the weird creepy silence music. I was like, what the fuck?
I mean, they are in like Series 7, but
they're not
Christmas special.
They're not in the Crimson Horror though.
I know. That's so dumb.
Oh dear. Anyway, moving on from hot pie, let's talk about the Brotherhood without banners. So the first one we're introduced to is Thoros of Myr, who is the drunk priest, who was sided by Angai, who is the archer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we meet the man who he resurrected from the dead 7 times, or 6 times, or whatever it was. Beric Dondarrion, who was a member of King's Landing who Ned Stark sent to deal with the Mountain and the Riverlands in Season 1. We saw him as a different actor, but that was his beginning. It was a very brief beginning, and then finally we meet him again here with an eye patch played by Richard Dormer, worshipping the Lord of Light. I thought their storyline was very interesting. I think they're quite intriguing characters, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they are quite intriguing characters for sure. I think what they get, they do enough to make the audience somewhat interested in who these people are.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned it won't be recently when we upload it. It'll be probably fucking years before. But in terms of filming, I recently filmed a review of The Holy Terror, and in that I mentioned the Brotherhood without banners, and how, despite the fact that they worship the Lord of Light, they're not dogmatic to every move. They say things like, gold wins wars, and the fact that they sell Gendry for gold because they need, weapons. I thought that was a very interesting thing. That not every decision they make is determined by the Lord of Light. It's only the big picture.
Mm-hmm. And I do like the idea of, just because they're doing good things, it doesn't mean like they're gonna do things like, for example, for free. They're not going to just use what they have. They are going to use every advantage they can take to eventually then do the right thing.
Yep. And
it's interesting. I always like those kind of stories.
The storyline, the sword fight with the Beric and the Hound I really liked. And also the other thing is with Thoros of Myr, like when Hot Pie obviously leaves, but I really like the way Thoros of Myr, like, Arya tries to use her words to get around him and he doesn't believe it. He's just sort of like, what the fuck? She's like, we have a blacksmith and I know how to use a sword. And then Thoros is like, and what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
I think Thoros of Myr is quite a good character. I think he's got some very comedic lines. And then, so like in the first half, it's very much him taunting Arya, and it's quite entertaining. But then, once you get to the second half, sort of near the middle of the series, I really like how it brings more out about the Brotherhood and what they believe in, especially once the Red Woman turns up, and we get that scene with Thoros, Beric, and the Red Woman. I just think they're very fascinating characters, and I also think the actors who play them are really good as well. Like Thoros, it's weird because he's not a pirate, but he feels like a pirate. But he's a very weird character because he's a drunk priest. Like when you look at him, you're like, this guy doesn't seem like a priest. But then of course you find out the reason why is because he didn't really believe in it for a while. He just sort of thought it was stories that they would tell the children. But it wasn't until he saw his friend Beric die on the battlefield, against the mountain, that he thought, well, I'm from Myr, and I grew up with the Lord of Light's, religion in my background, and the only words I know are the words of him. So he sort of thought back to his childhood and said, well, I'll just say the words because my friends just died. And obviously the Lord of Light brought Beric back from death. And then, of course, that begins the whole thing of them, starting this clan. I think it's really interesting. And I also think the actor who plays Beric Dondarrion is great as well, Richard Dormer. He's got a very strong voice. He says, the Lord of Light, the Lord of Light. You think you're afraid of fire, Clegane? I think they're great. Fantastic. I will have more to say about them at some point. But in regards to what they did with them this season, I thought they were very good and very interesting. And also the one other detail I'll add is the foreshadowing of the Red Wedding was fantastic, with the fact that they were near the twins, and then they said, we got reports that there are Lannister soldiers around. The fact that there's Lannister soldiers near the twins where the wedding's going to happen. That was very interesting. I liked that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I don't have much else to add to that.
They're not major characters, but they are fascinating.
No.
Some people are a little bit put off by the fact that Beric can be resurrected from the dead.
I can understand that.
But I think the way that the show sort of slowly builds all the magic into it is quite well done, I think. With like this season, us being introduced to Wargs, Dragonglass, and the Lord of Light's power. I mean, obviously we saw the Lord of Light's power last season with the Shade. But yeah, I think it was well built up too, and I like the fact that it's because they believe that Beric has a purpose. So it's not just a cop out. It's literally the Lord of Light has plans for him. It's just like we talked about how Rose, when she was Bad Wolf, saw that Jack, him becoming the face of Beau and revealing the secret. It's like his death is like a moment that is being planned. If that makes sense. Though having said that, unlike Jack, Beric doesn't come back to life just by proxy. He has to actually have a priest pray him back. Otherwise, the Lord of Light can't use his magic. Yeah, so there is an action involved. And then again, there's the whole thing about interpretation as well. Is like, is this really the Lord of Light, or are all the gods the same, or is this not even gods? Is this literally just something completely different that we don't know about? I like the way that the way that they write it. It makes all the gods a bit unclear as to what's true and what's false, because there's so many different gods, and we've seen powers used, but we don't really know the truth behind them. We only know what people believe. We can only deal with what we see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. Do you want to move on to the next storyline?
Sure.
Okay, now we get to the big one. Robb Stark.
Yeah. Yeah, the ending to a story is tragic, and it's very brutal, and it's very emotional and very heartbreaking. Like overall, I don't, because of how like impactful the ending was, I can't remember much of what they did overall this season.
Well, let me put it this way. Obviously, coming off season 2, he had to imprison his mother.
Yes.
The very start of the season is them finding out about the death of Hoster Tully. So, he ends up taking Harrenhal and giving it to Roose Bolton. And this starts the seeds. Well, at least there were seeds previously, but there's a lot of seeds in this season. Because I can talk about it more freely now because of perspective, but there's a lot of things at the time I couldn't really say. Because everything that happens with Robb this season is all building to the Red Wedding. That's the only purpose it has. In the sense that capturing Harrenhal, giving power to Roose Bolton, who's about to betray him, with him obviously having married his wife Talisa being a big mistake, with one of the biggest moments for Robb is, so obviously he marries Talisa and then they have to betroth Edmure to Rosalind Frey because of that. So when you meet them, they go to the funeral and Edmure has to be betrothed, but you can tell he's a bit useless, with the Blackfish obviously for some reason fucking hating his nephew, which is quite different in the books. It's actually, I don't know if have I told you what the funeral scene's like in the books? I think I have, right?
Possibly.
So in the books, the funeral scene plays out differently. The reason why Edmure can't shoot the arrow into his father is because he's too emotional, he can't focus. And the reason why the Blackfish takes away the bow is because he feels sympathy for his nephew, and he does it for him. Whereas in the TV show, Edmure can't do it because he's a fucking useless person, and Blackfish takes it away to show off.
Mm-hmm.
So the context is a bit different.
Yeah.
But with Robb, because of his mistake to marry Talisa, he has to betroth Edmure to the Freys. The other part of that, the big turning point, is when he loses the Karstark army because he beheads Rickard Karstark, who kills those Lannister boys because of Jaime killing his sons. Yeah. Which was a big mistake by Robb, because now he lost that big army. It meant that he then had to move in to try and get the Freys army on his side to attack Casterly Rock because of that mistake. I think that beheading was a big moment for Robb. And I like the way that they have that mirror with Theon last season with Roderick Cassell, and then they also mirror it with thinking that Jon Snow was also going to do it with that farmer, but then didn't. Mm-hmm. It was a fantastic mirroring three-way.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, I really liked that aspect of it. That whole section of episode 5 with Robb beheading Rickard Karstark was a big moment for his character. Of course, then the Red Wedding happens and he dies. So yeah, everything with Robb this season is all building to the Red Wedding. It's a very tightly written story between Harrenhal, River Run, and the twins. I'm just slowly losing the war with Tywin.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. Yeah, that is, the story is like every action has a consequence. Mm-hmm. And it was all leading up to the ending for him. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it's weird because the death makes you. Of course, you don't wish for main characters to die, if you are like enjoy them and you like them, but it's the tragedy of like he absolutely could have like done more as a character,
but because of all the mistakes he made, had a consequence.
And it's still like satisfying as a story, and that's really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I enjoyed Rob's story of this season, and obviously his death is like very well done and very tragic and brutal.
Yeah, it's one of those storylines where you don't quite know what's happening until the very end, and then in retrospect it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's, with hindsight, I think it's a fantastic storyline with Rob.
Yeah.
The one thing about it that I would say is possibly you could possibly, I wouldn't necessarily criticize it because I don't think it's bad in any way, but the one part about it that I've seen some people comment on that they're not quite sure on is the romance with Talisa, because it's sort of, I don't really know.
I'd say it's
I can't quite put
one
my
of the weak of romances.
I can't quite put my finger on it, what it is, but there's something
just
about
don't-
it that doesn't quite click.
I kind of just don't think they have as much chemistry as other romances do, or at least other pairings do. It's weird.
I would say there's probably more problems with them in season 2 though, not 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Them becoming a romance. But this season they're already married and she becomes pregnant. It's, I don't know. I feel like Talisa is one of the,
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really care for her
Yeah, I know.
overall as a character.
I know. She's
So that might be why, because I
Yeah.
think she is quite
She is a-
undeveloped,
she is a D&D creation after all.
and that's probably why she kind of feels
Mm.
underdeveloped, and why the connection between her and Rob, while it's fine enough and it works enough for the story, it's not on a level of Jon and Egret. It's not even on the sort of like connection that Jaime and Cersei have.
It's not even on the level that Tyrion and Shay have.
Mm-hmm. I honestly would call it weak.
Mm.
The best part about it is Rob and what he does, but with her, I'm not that invested in her at all. And I'm
Yeah.
not that heartbroken that she died.
She was quite a predictable character, wasn't she?
Yeah, and along with that, with sort of her really, really weird and not very good introduction, I think overall her character is quite, like, I probably am not going to remember her when we
Which is weird. It's weird though
when
because
we do the whole show, when we like wrap everything up.
yeah, it's just bizarre though because she's part of the biggest event in the whole story,
Mm-hmm.
but her character as a whole isn't that interesting. The only
I
thing,
don't think she has much of a character.
yeah, the most interesting thing about her is that she's Rob's wife.
Yeah, it's pretty true. Like, the only characters I cared about from that story, like, truly were Rob and Catelyn.
I suppose, I don't know. I suppose there's some interesting subtext around her and how she's a nurse, but
They don't really go further that.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Like, we get that brief scene with her and the Lannister boys, but that doesn't really go anywhere. Because they get killed the next time we see them, and it's more to do with, like, Rob's character than it is to do with hers.
Yeah, she's an odd one.
Hell, I think even Catelyn gets more affected by it than her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Honestly, thinking about it now, I honestly wouldn't call her like a good character. I think she's just fine and she's serviceable.
She's better than Rickon though.
Oh yeah, she's more of a character than Rickon, but I don't think she pulls her weight in the story aspect.
Yeah, because I just get the feeling that they didn't really know what to do with it.
Yeah, I think her writing is very weak.
She's not detrimental to the story, though. She's just...
No. She's just underdeveloped.
Mm.
She doesn't hinder the story, but she doesn't benefit it in any way.
Mm. Yeah. Dunno. I thought she was quite good in her final episode, though. I feel like we got quite a bit of good stuff with her there, but it was kind of too late by that point.
Yeah, and then she gets killed.
Yeah, it's just...
So,
I don't know. Oh, God, it's weird.
like, it's that whole... When she talks about naming their child, what they're going to do with the child. And that's at that point in time, you're like, oh, I know what's happening. And then it's like, you don't really think of them... probably more so her. You don't think of them as characters, you think of them as like ticking time bombs. In a way.
Yeah.
Because you know what's coming because of that line.
Yeah, I would argue fucking Rickon Stark is more of a character than her. and he's barely in the show. Like, his story is quite interesting. The fact that he is a rugged northerner that wants to execute people for their crimes, but everything he does is justified. Because both his sons were killed at the hands of Jaime Lannister and Catelyn let them go. And then, him saying, the biggest mistake you made was marrying her, and he was absolutely right. And of course the scene where he kills the Lannister boys and he gets beheaded for it. He's a big part of the plot, and I really, really like him. It's just... Yeah. It's interesting how him having such a small bit of screen time, he has more of an impact, I feel, than someone that was part of the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yes.
I think again, it comes down to the fact that Rickon Stark's a book character and Talisa isn't.
Yeah, and I think it suffers for that.
I'm just sort of going to move around all the different characters and sort of build up to the ones that are the most interesting. Rob was really interesting, but obviously I had to start with him because it was his storyline mainly. Hoster Tully obviously died. So with that, we are introduced to his brother and his son. We get Edmure Tully and Brynden the Blackfish Tully. What were your thoughts on their characters?
I liked Blackfish.
I think Clive Russell was a very good casting choice for him. I agree. Definitely played the role well. I think I like the actor who plays Edmure, but the character is very...
Lacking,
yeah. He's not a particularly good character in the books either, to be honest. But I think the difference is with the books, he's just sort of there, whereas in the show, he's...
I don't really know who he really is as a person.
The thing that they added to him in the show is that they made him completely useless, and it's like no one likes him.
Yeah, I really think that detrimented his character.
I think as a... It's weird that we talk about all these characters with like question marks around them, yet when we get to the Red Wedding, they're actually really good. Like when that specific episode 9, all the characters are really good in that one. It's just before that, it's like, not sure. But I do think...
And even then, that episode doesn't really give them a fully fledged character. It just...
Yeah, but I like what they
them.
do with them in that episode, though. Like with Edmure anticipating who his wife is going to be is a really interesting part of it. And then his shock and awe of like, oh fuck, this is actually quite an attractive girl you've given me. She didn't expect. And then I like how he gets a bit big-headed, how he's like, oh, well, you got to be careful when I bring this out. Like he's, thinking that he's having the time of his life.
Yeah.
But when he's actually been blindsided and captured.
Yeah.
But in terms of like at Riverrun, he's sort of just a bit of a loser, really, Edmure. One thing I will say that I love about the Tullys is their armor. How their armor has like scales on it. I think that looks really cool. It's one of the best looking armors in the show. But onto the Blackfish, who I think is a much more interesting character. I really like that scene he has with Catelyn when they talk about Hoster. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
and he's a fun character because he's very sassy, very badass. But again, like a lot of characters this season, he doesn't get as much screen time.
No.
It's the whole thing of overstuffing that this season kind of has an issue with, that it just overstuffs everything and you can't really bleed all the different details into it.
Yeah.
Moving past the Blackfish, though, we have Catelyn Stark.
Boy. I'm shocked of how much I loved her as a character. She is one of the most surprising aspects to come out of this show for me so far. When I first saw her in those first couple of episodes, I did not expect her to be one of the most well-defined characters within these first 3 seasons, and the actress is probably the best actress in the show.
She's brilliant.
For me, like, I think what she brings to the role, the like tragedy, the devastation, and then the brutalness as well, especially with her final scene. Like, I'm shocked of how layered she is as a person and as a character.
Yeah.
It really makes me sad with her death, because she witnessed the loss of everything she had in her life.
Yeah, the saddest death at the Red Wedding, funnily enough, isn't even Rob, it's actually Catelyn. Which is who's a character at the very beginning, like, a lot of people despise because of her hatred for Jon. But then we get that brilliant scene in episode 2 where she talks about how she couldn't keep her promise because she couldn't love a motherless child. That's one of the best scenes of the season, I think.
Yeah.
Her basically admitting to herself that she wronged Jon, but he'll never know.
No one's ever going to know that.
But yeah,
because the only person she told was Talisa.
But yeah, her final outing in the Reigns of Castamere was just a brilliant performance. I thought she absolutely stole it. And as a character, as a whole, I think she's had a very good character arc from start to end. Like, great, absolutely great, fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, like, just her making all these mistakes of, like, just it's all crumbling down. It comes with Rob too, sense of her sending Jaime back, and just her losing everything. And it's so sad thinking that she dies with the knowledge that none of her children are at home. Her home's burned, her husband's dead, her son's dead. You know, she doesn't know where her daughters are, she doesn't know where her other sons are. And she could never tell Jon the truth about how she felt, about how she wronged him. It's a very, very tragic ending for her.
Yeah.
And the fact that it all came down to her trusting people that she knew as children, you know, Littlefinger and Walder Frey. The fact that she put so much trust in these people, but they all betrayed her. Brutal it was. She's one of the highlights of the season for me, despite the fact that she doesn't have as much screen time as some other characters. But I thought all the screen time she had was very effective. However,
I agree.
There is one other character in this storyline that is my favourite part. And it probably didn't quite click for you as well, maybe because you didn't have the hindsight at the time, but because I'm rewatching this, I have a completely different point of view on it. But my favourite character in the storyline is Roose Bolton. I think Roose Bolton is absolutely spot on in Season 3. I think he's perfect. Everything he does is it's all foreshadowing in his character. It's all subtle, and the way it makes sense how he doesn't reveal anything because he's a psychopath, the fact that he doesn't show emotion that much, it makes it natural for him to subtly suggest what's about to happen without you realizing it. And I love the way from the very beginning he has that conversation with Rickon Stark about Catelyn and Robb and the capture, and how it's slowly looming in the background of like, who is this person that's torturing Theon, and how it's revealed eventually that it's Bruce's bastard, and how they burned Winterfell to the ground. How Roose Bolton is forging letters, how he isn't telling Robb certain things, how he gives strange looks when he sees Talisa, how he captures Jaime but doesn't give him back to Robb, he gives him to Tywin. And then that leading into the Red Wedding, the Lannisters send their regards, and then that scene he has with Walder Frey in episode 10. It's just absolutely perfect. And I don't know, maybe it's because his character is a little bit like Tywin that I really like him, but I think Roose Bolton was so well written, so well executed, so well acted on every level for me. He hit it out of the park for the storyline. Would you agree with me?
Yeah. Yeah, his role he played was very well and tightly written, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think all the stuff that he does, does a really good job of building up to that moment. Him sticking to the shadows practically with what he's doing. And yeah, I think it's, in terms of story, it's very satisfying to see all those pieces linked together for that final bit at the end of episode 9.
Yep. There's so many times throughout the season that I was like asking questions about Roose Bolton because he was doing things that were a bit strange. And I could tell you could tell there was something up, but you couldn't tell exactly what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, I believe that at some point during episode 9, it clicked in your mind what was happening.
Yeah.
Like the reason why Roose Bolton was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fantastic character. Absolutely love Roose Bolton, man. He was one of a kind. Absolutely great. Well, not was, is. He's fucking Warden of the North. He's at the height of his power.
Yeah.
And you could say he's almost like a Tywin in the North in some ways.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought Roose Bolton was excellent. Nothing more to say on that, though, because it was all foreshadowing and it was all brilliant. And the subtleties in the subtleties in the actor who plays him too are just off the wall. I love the scene he has with Jaime in Kiss by Fire, where he's like tempting him to like reveal things about Cersei. He's like, "And your sister," and then looks down at him, and you can see Jaime's in terror thinking about what happened to Cersei. And then Bolton does it because he sort of believes the rumor about them. Do you have anything else to add on top of that?
No, I pretty much agree with everything. Yeah, it was a very well put together, tightly written story.
Mm-hmm. The other element of that is obviously Walder Frey, who appears in the last 2 episodes. It's interesting because Walder Frey has only appeared in 3 episodes so far, but they're like 3 of your favourite episodes in the show.
Yeah.
Because he appeared in Baelor, and then he appeared in The Reigns of Castamere and Misa. So your thoughts on Walder Frey?
He kind of seems like the mastermind behind it all.
Well, to be fair,
in
it
a
was.
way.
To be fair, it kind of was Tywin Lannister, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like his like sort of despicable meaner, like how he used like.
Well, once he knew that he had them, he knew he could fuck with them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's like, yeah, the way he like went about it was. It was like both horrible and brilliant at the same time.
Mm.
Yeah, I enjoyed David Bradley's performance.
Oh yeah, again, like perfect casting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Robb Stark!
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
He's very creepy too.
Yes.
And with that, we met Lothar Frey, Blackwald Frey, and Rosalind Frey, mainly. Again, I don't have anything to say. Lothar Frey gets a bit of dialogue, but he's just kind of a shithead, really. You get like the Frey sons and daughters are all just peasants. They're all just really shit people, or just yeah. But with that storyline, that crosses over with another one, because obviously part of this storyline is Qyburn, who was rescued by Robb at the start of season 3. Well, technically it was Talisa because she's a nurse. And Qyburn mends Jaime's wounds. He mends Jaime's arm and then goes to King's Landing. So, if it wasn't for Robb and Talisa finding them there, he wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
But we didn't get that much with Qyburn. But what did you think of the brief moments we got of him with his witchcraft?
I thought it was interesting. I think he's definitely a character that could be explored on more as the show goes on. I think the initial stuff we got of him were interesting.
Of course, that then leads into, honestly, one of my favourite characters of the whole season, mainly for his development and what he reveals about himself and his character arc, and that is Jaime Lannister.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on Jaime Lannister?
He was great. He was utterly brilliant in every episode he was in. His performance was brilliant. And I think he had probably one of the highlights of the season and probably one of the best scenes of the show so far.
His entire storyline was fantastic, with him and Brienne obviously being on the road, being captured by Locke, having his hand cut off. Then, like you said, the scene in Kiss by Fire, probably outside of the Red Wedding, probably my favourite scene of the whole season, which was when he talked about when he saved the city from the Mad King and Ned Stark called him Kingslayer.
Yeah.
So fucking brilliant. The fact that happens at that point in time with Brienne, and then that leads into the Bear and the Maiden Fair when he saves her from the pit. I love it. I absolutely love it. I also love the fact that he says to Roose Bolton in a friendly way, he says, "Tell Robb that the Lannisters send their regards," and that's the words that he says before he stabs Robb and kills him. But then, of course, at the very end, he meets up with Cersei again after all that time. And I love the whole detail of the fact that he missed so much when he was gone. And he had no idea what was happening in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Jaime's storyline in this season was absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
I agree. Good stuff. Great stuff. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah. And his chemistry with Brienne as well. I thought Brienne had a very good season too.
I agree. I thought she was very decent.
Yeah. I love the way they bounce off each other and they ask each other questions. And how she grows respect for him is very good.
For sure.
Yeah. Excellent. Absolutely excellent. Jaime's storyline was just so stellar. And surprise, surprise, it's ripped straight from the books.
Shocking.
Locke was there too, but again, his main purpose was obviously cutting off Jaime's hand, and then obviously there was the Bear and the Maiden Fair pit as well. Aside from that, there wasn't much to his character. Locke is actually a combination of two characters from the books, but he still works. I think he's definitely more on sort of the villainous side of things, though you can see that his motivation is more so like because he's being ordered by Roose Bolton to do it. What I like about Locke's existence is that it adds to the whole question behind Roose Bolton and his loyalty, because not only with Ramsay but also with Locke, it's almost like these Bolton men are aligned with Robb, but they are doing some very questionable things. And it's a very interesting element to the overall story, I think.
Yeah.
The other side of that Bolton storyline, though, was with Theon Greyjoy and Ramsay Snow. So how did you feel about that? Because I remember you said that Theon was your favourite character in Season 2.
Yeah, this season he definitely took a backseat in terms of like his involvement. I still enjoyed most of the scenes. I just wish he was just in it more. I guess that's my main issue.
Well, at this point in the books, he's not even on screen. So, lucky we got him at all.
Yeah. It's an odd one. At least with Theon specifically. Because I enjoyed Ramsay.
I think Theon's strongest stuff is in the first half of the season, when Ramsay's lying to him.
I'd agree with that.
And you get that scene before he gets captured again, where he talks about how my real father died in King's Landing. I thought that was the best stuff. Then after that, once Ramsay captures him again, it becomes more about Ramsay, I think.
It does.
And then, of course, he cuts off his cock. I think in terms of the overall story, it functions really well in the sense that there's a mystery around who this guy is. And then once it's revealed that it's Roose Bolton's bastard, it all sort of clicks. Unfortunately, though, I think with you and with a lot of people having known about the show, quite a lot of people sort of, because they're aware of who Ramsay is, because he's quite a big part of the show, because when they watch this season, having known about the show now, they sort of click in their mind, well, that's Ramsay. But if you're watching the show for the first time and you don't know anything, then it's a lot more mysterious. It's just unfortunately because of future stuff, people sort of the mystery is kind of spoiled. I also think you could also say it's kind of it's a little bit obvious as to who it is as well, because like, well, if you do the maths, it's like, of course it's Roose Bolton's bastard, because who else could it be? Because that's exactly what happened at the end of season 2. Roose Bolton sent his bastard, so it must be right. But yeah, I thought Ramsay was good. I think, though, there's definitely a point to be made that Theon has taken a backseat, but I do think there is a necessary character beat there in the sense of him transforming into sort of Reek, now that he's lost everything. He's almost become suicidal at this point.
Pretty much is.
Yeah, so I think it worked, but it definitely wasn't a big part of the story, for sure.
No.
It is a fascinating storyline, because in the books we never even see this part of it. We see the opposite side. We see what Ramsay does outside of the torture scenes. There's a big deception around him. And we don't really see Theon again until much later. But, yeah. This time around we see the reverse side, where we see what he actually does to Theon on screen. And I think it's solid, but definitely, again, like I said, it definitely isn't as prominent.
No.
In that storyline, we were introduced to Violet and Miranda, who were the ones that seduced Theon. And then, of course, we got a very brief scene with Balon and Yara as well. We're very clear that Balon doesn't care that his son's lost his manhood, and Yara says that she's going to go save him. So yeah, anything you want to add on those?
No, not really, because they were very brief.
We only have one more storyline left to talk about.
All right.
Daenerys Targaryen.
She finally actually feels like a character. Somewhat.
And why is that?
Because we fully understand her motivation.
I suppose.
Like I said in the Misa review, I think that final scene for the episode, I think, really helped put across who Daenerys is and why she's doing everything she's doing. It's because she cares about people. Because people in this world who are not of the high class are swept to the side.
Yeah.
And are basically slaves.
Yep. Yes. That is true.
Because I think so far she's been very dawdling. She hasn't really.
Well, I've explained this many times before.
Reason.
I've explained this many times before. It's literally because we don't know what she's thinking. We don't have that inner monologue. We don't have that point of view. So you kind of have to make up in your head what's going on with her. And for me, that makes her quite a... In this season, I feel like she's quite a... She feels quite like a flat character to me. Because I don't really get any vibes of moral ambiguity from her at all. I only get... she feels very heroic, like she's going on a barnstorming tour around Slaver's Bay, taking what she wants. And it's a story, for sure, and we know what she wants. But I just don't think she's a very interesting character, to be honest. Because I don't really have any insight into what she's thinking, and we don't get that many scenes of her advisors arguing with her. We don't get many people questioning her. It's very... This feels like a mission in Season 3.
I agree with that up until the last scene, in terms of what she's thinking. I think everything else before Misa, I would actually pretty much agree.
Well, like I said, within Now As Watch has ended, there is no moral ambiguity around her burning the slavers.
Yeah.
It's seen as a heroic moment. And I think that is probably where I sort of lose a little bit of interest with her, is that she's portrayed very much as a hero, which is...
Yeah, in that way, yeah.
It's not exactly... Compared to other characters, it's not exactly the most interesting story for me. There isn't that much stopping her. There isn't that many questions asked. She has a lot of followers that believe in her, and that's about it, really. I only see... It's kind of... How do I put this? It's kind of like a... It's kind of like the... I can't... Is there a storyline that we've just talked about that's all character but no forward momentum? Maybe... I don't know. It's hard to say, really.
I guess Theon and Ramsay, that's pretty much character based.
I suppose. The thing is, it's not quite as developed. But...
I'd say it's more focused on character than
with
progression.
Daenerys, it feels more plot focused this season rather than character focused. And
yeah,
she gets things done, for sure. And I know what her motivation is. It's obviously saving slaves. That's a very big part of her character. But I don't know much about her apart from that. She's lost a lot of perspective. I feel like there was... When you get scenes like in Season 1 with her and Khal Drogo, and especially her brother, we got... And also Jorah Mormont, too, in Seasons 1 and 2. We got a lot of insight into what she was thinking. We got a lot of insight into her thought process, her strategies around everything. And it was all very interesting. And then this season, there wasn't really any of that at all. She didn't have any of that. It was literally just, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And then it ended with her saving the slaves and happy ending, whatever. But I can't really say much about her beyond that, because apart from that, she's just sort of a conqueror, really. But a sort of liberating conqueror, not a tyrannical one.
Sure, from a character perspective, I agree that this season, for me, up until the last episode, she's just... There's nothing really there. And it's continue it on from, I think, season 2, where her story is pretty much kind of a bit of a mess. I think, like I mentioned in the Misa review, I think from the narrative perspective of the show, I think the way they utilise the final scene to go along with the last 2 episodes, I think fits really well. It's just, I think everything before with her story, before then, is rushed and not very well executed.
Yeah, there needs to be more, and hopefully we will get more.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't fuck it up, right?
I couldn't imagine how they would fuck it up.
So, with that, we get Jorah Mormont, and the only thing he really gets to do this whole season is the tension around Barristan. Because apart from that, he doesn't get as many scenes with Daenerys, which is disappointing, because they're some of my favourite scenes. When it's him questioning Daenerys' motives. But we didn't really get that, unfortunately.
No, we didn't. Yeah, that's pretty much a non-factor this season. And I hope they go more into it next season.
Because again, it's the same thing with Barristan, because he's not a mystery. We know who he is. He doesn't get that much to do.
Pretty much.
With that, we get Melisandre and Grey Worm. Melisandre obviously being the translator, Grey Worm being the head of the Unsullied. And she gets the Unsullied army from Astapor after burning Krasn's Mona clothes, who I thought was actually quite a well-acted character. I really liked him. And all the subtitles, that was very clever.
Yeah.
I do understand the whole thing of, like, she sort of stopped mucking around, because previously she spent a lot of time mucking around, whereas here she's just sort of going full force with her plans. And I get that. It's just I wish we got more insight into her thought process. That's all. I just wish we got more of that. So with Astapor, she gets the Unsullied army, and then in the second half she goes to Yunkai and she gets the Second Sons on her side as well, with Dario Naharis. Again, who is just a rushed character. That's all I can say. He's interesting, but there isn't enough. It's too... I don't know what to say. It's just, there's so much that they could have done, but they didn't, because this season is so jam-packed with characters that they didn't have enough time to do any of this shit. And it's like, Christ. Like, you can really see, if this was one season for one book, how rushed this would have been. This would have been insane.
Yeah.
I honestly think you could have made a Storm of Swords 3 seasons. The only problem is you wouldn't have had a conclusive episode 9, because you would have had to do the Red Wedding in the second season.
Yeah.
I don't really know what you would have done in episode 9, to be honest. Maybe I suppose Kissed by Fire would sort of be that point, wouldn't it?
Possibly.
I really don't know. I really don't know what I would have done, honestly. But it just... all the storylines feel rushed. Well, not all of them, but some of them feel rushed, and it's irritating me. Because they could have been so much better. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about Daenerys' storyline beyond that, because it's, again, like we said, it's very plot-focused. And I don't have any other, like, human characters to discuss, really. We do have the direwolves, the dragons, and the White Walkers to talk about. So, with the direwolves, we got a little bit with them. We got... Shaggy Dog's going with Rickon. We obviously have Summer, who attacked one of the wildlings, episode 9. And then, of course, Grey Wind was killed. I thought the direwolves were used fairly well. I think it's a shame that they don't have as much screen time, probably because the CGI is too complicated to do. Then, of course, there's the dragons as well, who are definitely put to good use. I think it's one of the most iconic moments for the dragons when they burn Krasners, actually, when Drogon burns Krasners. And, of course, the White Walkers, the one appearance we get is when Sam kills one with dragon glass.
Yes.
So, anything you want to add on top of that?
Not that I can think of.
It's really weird thinking about this, because in my mind, Season 3 was always, like, a really strong one. Because of, I mean, obviously when you think about, like, the Red Wedding, you think about the King's Landing storyline, you think about Jaime's storyline, right? And Jon's. You always think, like, really positively about it. But then going through all these characters, I've started to realize, like, how much of it is crammed in. And there's a lot of them that feel like they could have had more time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
It's an interesting thing to think about, actually. Okay, well, that's all the characters, unless you want to talk about any of the others again.
And I think that's everybody.
Right.
That I can think of.
Yeah.
That took, what,
Very
2 hours?
Yeah, very peculiar season for that, I think, because with a lot of them, it's not necessarily that they did anything wrong, it's literally just I wish there was more development.
Pretty much.
So we'll move on to the categories where you all can vote in the straw polls in the description for, but we have our own choices too. So, the standout character of Season 3. Who is your choice?
Jaime Lannister. That's... For every scene he was in, he was absolutely brilliant. But the thing that puts him over the edge for me is the scene in, I believe it is Kissed by Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that scene was incredible. And that scene is what made me realise how good of a character he was, and it pissed me off how badly they treated him in Season 8. Like,
Ooh.
I understand now, like, how much they fucked his character.
Well, we'll get to that when we get to that. Those Season 8.
Yes.
Those Season 8 reviews are going to be interesting.
They will.
Well, it's
yeah, Jaime Lannister is great.
Well, it's interesting because I only have 2 options to pick out of for this. The 2 that I'm torn between. One of them is Jaime. The other one is Tywin. But I think I'm just going to have to slightly agree with you there. Because Jaime Lannister has the most character development out of anyone in Season 3.
Yeah.
And it's just so good. I mean, I love Tywin, but with Tywin, he's been consistent from the start. Like, with him, he's always there. He's always great. But with Jaime Lannister, this was his season. This was his time to shine. He is by far the standout in the sense of where his character went on his journey through the season. Everything he was involved in, it was fantastic. From his hand being cut off, his relationship with Brienne blooming, with the scene with Kissed by Fire in the bathtub being one of the best in the whole story, one of the best George R. R. Martin scenes ever, with the Bear and the Maiden Fair, with him saving Brienne from the pit, Lannister send their regards, with him meeting at Cersei at the end again, just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Loved it. Loved the entire thing. Jaime in this season was at his absolute peak as a character, I think. It's one of the most interesting character developments I've ever seen in anything. And like you said, it's such a fucking shame that they ruined it at the end of the story, at the end of the show. But we'll get to that. For now, we can enjoy what they did with Jaime. Standout location. So, for the options, we have the Fist of the First Men, the Wildling Camp, Craster's Keep, the Night Fort, Castle Black, the Dread Fort, the Iron Islands, Riverrun, Harrenhal, the Twins, King's Landing, Dragonstone, Astapor, and Yunkai.
I believe it's the right location. I went for the Twins for purely based on episode 9.
Right. Yeah, the cinematography around the Twins was really good this season, especially in 10 as well.
Yeah, it was. The cinematography was great. And yeah, everything that went on in episode 9 was very impactful. So it made a very memorable location. I think that's the only reason why I'm picking it.
So I've got 3 options to choose from. One of them's the twins. I've also got King's Landing because we got to see more of the Sept of Baelor, which was fantastic.
Yeah, that was cool.
And also the Dreadfort, because there's there's quite a strong claustrophobic feeling to the Dreadfort. I really liked that. But I would probably agree with you on the twins. I thought the way that they filmed around them, the twins, was really interesting. The way, obviously, we've seen it before in season 1 with the bridges, but this time around with the camp there and the fires, and like with Roose Bolton standing on top of the tower and all that, it was shot in a very creative way, and I thought visually it was a spectacle to look at. You know, I love the geography and the scenery of the twins. It's a fascinating one.
I agree.
Yeah. So I'll agree with you on that. So we've agreed so far. Well done. Okay, standout side character.
Egret. She was phenomenal. She's probably my favourite side character right now. Her story is great, and her relationship with Jon's great. She's such a well-written side character. She's great. Brilliant.
Yes. So I have 5 options for this one. One of them's Egret. Then I've got Marjorie and Olenna Tyrell. I have Brienne of Tarth and Roose Bolton. So I think I will eliminate Olenna as much as I enjoy her. I will eliminate her because she isn't as involved in the story. I will also eliminate Marjorie, even though I love her. I think I would probably say Egret was probably stronger than Marjorie just by a little bit. I think I might also eliminate Brienne of Tarth as well, but even though she's brilliant in this season, I think the focus is more so on Jaime. Which leaves a very hard choice for me between Egret and Roose Bolton. Because they're very different characters, but they play a very strong role in season 3. Jesus, this is difficult. I think I might be the edgy contrarian. I'm going to go for Roose Bolton. For me, it's a bit different because I had perspective of the Red Wedding from the start. So for me, the nuances with Roose Bolton were a lot more clear to me than you. And throughout this entire season, his entire storyline is just so perfectly crafted. His character, the performance, it's just his instrument, the way he builds up to the Red Wedding. All the details of Roose Bolton are fantastic. I love him. Absolutely love him. Egret's very close second though. She's also great. Which means now we come to the standout music track. The options are Mother of Dragons, The Night is Dark, The North Remembers, Heir to Winterfell, Reek, For the Realm, Dracarys, I Paid the Iron Price, You Know Nothing, It's Always Summer Under the Sea, Chaos is a Ladder, Wall of Ice, The Bear and the Maiden Fair, King of the North, White Walkers, A Lannister Always Pays His Debts, I Have to Go North, The Lannisters Send Their Regards, Misa, and Kingslayer. A lot of great ones to choose from, as always. So which one's yours?
I chose Kingslayer.
Jaime's theme, the most recent one we listened to.
That one was phenomenal. Very well suited to Jaime, and I think it does play during that scene in Kissed by Fire. Yeah, it's an incredible track, and it's so well suited to that scene. And so well suited for Jaime. Yeah.
That was close
beautiful
for me.
Stuff.
That was pretty close. There was a lot of themes that were close because it's obviously Raymond Javadi's music is just it's off the charts. That one was very close. I would also say there's a few others. The Lannisters Send Their Regards was a very good track because it played throughout the entire Red Wedding. It was a longer track, and it was so well fitted for the Red Wedding. Then there's 2 others that I'm struggling to choose between, because the 2 that I'm not sure which one I prefer is Chaos is a Ladder and A Lannister Always Pays His Debts. Oh God, I'm gonna say my favorite is A Lannister Always Pays His Debts, that instrumental version of the Reigns of Castamere theme, because boy oh boy, that Lannister theme is something special. It's a proper banger, and the context behind the lyrics of it is excellent, but to then hear the instrumental version as well, that plays as score, non-diegetically, is fantastic. I love that song, but Chaos's Ladder was also very close, playing at Littlefinger's sort of final scene of the season. Yeah, Lannister Always Pays His Debts is great. It's one of the most memorable tracks for me in the show, the Lannister theme.
Yeah.
It's excellent. It perfectly fits that house as well.
Yeah.
So, now we move to the standout worst thing about the season. So, I'm going to read out all the options. Now, these aren't necessarily things that I think. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But these are things that I think generally people would criticize about Season 3. So, obviously, with almost everything we're going to have on these, it's always going to have changes from the book as one of the options. Mance Raider being underused is one of them. Loras Tyrell not being in grief over Renly is one of them. Stannis' character arc being botched is one of them. Gratuitous torture scenes with Ramsay. Daenerys' storyline being rushed and a lack of inner monologue causing flat characterization. Also those people that complained about the racial focus of the slaves. Only the first half of the book adapted, and then limited scenes for certain characters.
I think what I put down like stories and some characters being really rushed.
Right, so
I guess again,
the last
you could
one,
say
the
stuff like Daenerys.
limited scenes for certain characters is the one you put, right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that for what I put down. Yeah, because I think a lot of characters did, not a lot, but some characters were rushed and the stories were rushed this season for sure.
I'm going to go for a bit more of a personal beef. I'm going to go with Stannis' character arc being botched. Because, like I said, Stannis Baratheon's one of my favourites, and they fucked it. And I think more than anything, like, rushed characters is a problem, but at the very least, every other character, even if it was rushed, it was still a good story. It was just a bit too quick. It was a bit too, like, molded over, didn't quite develop as much. But with Stannis Baratheon's character, they actually made some mistakes. They made some pretty fatal errors that caused it to sort of stagnate and become a mess. And he was very inconsistently written, which is not good. And it's a fucking shame, because Stannis Baratheon, man, is such a great character, and they botched his character arc, and wow, those fools. D&D. We kind of forgot about Stannis Baratheon. The standout thumbnail, we don't know what they are yet, so vote. Anything else you want to add on to any of those that we just talked about before we get into the ranking?
No, I think that's everything.
Alright then, now we get to the part you've all been waiting for. The exciting part, which is when we rank the episodes from 10 to 1. The way this works is we have one person read their 10, the next person reads their 10, and we zigzag to the top. If we match on any, we snap. We talk about it together. This is so we can rank the episodes, give our opinion, and then sort of give our final thoughts on all the episodes now that we have perspective of the whole season. From memory, we've actually differed quite a bit in the past, mainly on the Season 2 one, so I'll be interested to see how we differ this time round as well.
Yeah.
For me, I think out of all the ones we've done so far, this was the hardest one for me to rank, because a lot of the episodes are very close together in my mind.
Yeah, same.
Whereas other seasons, there was a bit more of a distinct difference. So this one could be all over the place, because I sort of switch around them in my mind quite a bit, but I've settled on a list. So from memory, who started last time we did this in Season 2?
I think I did. I really don't remember.
I think it was actually me, because I think you did it for Season 1.
Oh yeah, I might have done. Yeah, I think I probably did Season 1.
Alright, so you start this time. What is your number 10?
Dark Wings, Dark World.
Dark Wings, Dark Words?
I think I did world.
It's words.
Nah, that's my fault. Yeah, Dark Wings, Dark Words.
All right then. Why is it number 10?
I just can't remember a lot that actually happened within that episode. I remember liking it, but I don't think it left as big an impact on me.
So from memory, that was the episode that had the Catelyn scene in it when she was talking about Jon. That was the highlight for you, from memory.
Yeah, that was the highlight, but I can't remember anything else from it.
It has the crossbow scene in that one.
Oh, that's a good scene too. Yeah, but like I mentioned, all of these, I would say, honestly, all from 10 to 4 are all pretty close together.
It's a very consistent season, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's it's really hard to
Most of the episodes have about the same amount of positives and the same amount of problems.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right, my number 10 is Walk of Punishment. Now, this is the episode that I had the most problems with in the season. Because this was the episode... this episode had Hot Pie's exit. It also had the scene with Stannis Baratheon where he's a pervert on the Red Woman. I really didn't like that scene. That was quite possibly the worst scene of the whole season. It was all an in-between for a lot of the storylines. The best part of the whole episode was Jaime having his hand cut off. That was a big part of it.
Yeah.
But this was the one with Hoster Tully's funeral. And, again, talking about how Riverrun felt a bit undercooked. We didn't really get that many characters. The changing of the Blackfish and Edmure is weird. Then, of course, it's... we get Astapor's introduction of sorts. It's sort of an in-between of when she first arrives and then when she eventually takes the Unsullied the next episode. But it's very much an in-between for that regard. And, I mean, overall it was strong, I suppose. I suppose the one other highlight would be Mance Raider saying he's going to light the biggest fire the North's ever seen. Yeah, I think for me it was the weakest just because it had some of the weakest scenes for me, especially with Stannis and Hot Pie. Those were very weird. I will say I did really like the part with Ramsay though, killing his own men. That was quite good. But yeah, overall that one for me was the weakest just because of some of the scenes that were in it. It was... Although, to be fair, I did really like the scene with Podrick and how they were like, tell us more about what happened. That was quite good. I did like that.
No,
but yeah, overall I just think it was solid, but I put it at last because I feel like it made the most mistakes overall compared to other episodes. So yeah, Walk of Punishment's my number 10. What is your number 9?
Vala Daharis.
Snap.
Yeah, I just remember it being just a solid first episode of the season.
It's quite mild. It's quite a mild episode.
It didn't really do anything too crazy or anything too impactful. It was just a really solid reintroduction to the world. My
favourite scenes in it, firstly, is when Jon Snow meets Mance Raider. And then, of course, the scene with Tywin and Tyrion where he says, "You are an ill-made, spiteful little creature." But apart from that, it wasn't particularly special. It was just consistently fine. I will say I also really liked when Davos was found. That was quite a good scene.
Yeah, that was quite good.
Yeah, but apart from that, I don't have much to add really. It just sort of it was solid, but it wasn't anything too special. Alright then, does that mean I have to go my number 8 because we snapped?
Guess so.
Right then, well my number 8 is Dark Wings, Dark Words. And the reason why I put it higher is because, like Vela de Hyris, it's a very solid episode. However, it has the scene with Catelyn, where she talks about Jon Snow. And that bumps it up massively for me, because that scene is brilliant. There's also some nice stuff with Jaime and Brienne as well, because it's the one where they get captured on the bridge by Locke. I like the whole thing around, if you kill me, you'll fail your mission, but if you don't kill me, I'll kill you. That was quite good. And also, like we said, the crossbow scene with Marjorie and Joffrey. Yeah, it's just quite a solid episode for me. Dark Wings, Dark Words, with one very specifically brilliant scene. What is your number 8?
My number 8 is Walk of Punishment.
There we go.
Yeah, pretty much for the same reasons as you said. Again, same amount of problems and same amount of things I liked about it. The Ramsay stuff I enjoyed. The hot pie stuff was so dumb and weird. And yeah, obviously the loss of Jaime's hand was quite an interesting and impactful way to end the episode. So yeah, and I remember the episode being fairly solid as well. So yeah.
Well, there we
That's
go then.
8.
So yeah, the first 3 on the list are the first 3 episodes of the season, so it got off to quite a slow start, I feel.
It did. I remember feeling that way.
My number 7 is The Climb.
Ooh.
Now, thematically speaking, brilliant. I loved the ending. The last 5 minutes of this episode were absolutely brilliant, and I loved the thread of them climbing the wall throughout. And I just loved Chaos as a Ladder. That was excellent. That was absolutely excellent. I fucking loved that. With Roz's death, with Littlefinger leaving on the ship, and then Jon and Egret climbing the wall. That was one of the highlights of the whole season. However, apart from that, it was kind of a filler episode, because the rest of it was quite consistent, but it wasn't that interesting. It was fine and it was good, but in comparison to the rest of the season, it was definitely a bit of a standstill. It's the reason, and like, if it wasn't for that one big overarching theme, it probably would have been lower, to be honest. But having said that, Chaos as a Ladder was one of my favourite parts of season 3. Loved that. That's why The Climb has risen to number 7. What is your number 7?
My number 7 is Now His Watch Has Ended.
Ooh. Oh dear.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's happened?
Again, another solid episode. Overall, I think a lot of people putting it higher on the list, it will be mainly because of the Daenerys moment.
It's also the death of
Geo
Mormon and Craster as well.
Yeah, and again, I think I think I said at the time that I felt that whole thing was a bit iffy in some places. I just think this episode's really solid, and I think it's better than the first 3 episodes. I just feel there's a couple of issues here and there that are kind of glaring.
Like what?
I would say the ending with Daenerys, like you mentioned, it's definitely played off of like a heroic moment, but the reason why I'm not invested in it is because at that point in time I really am not on board with her character, so it doesn't connect well enough.
Okay, I'll have more to say on that episode when we get to it in my part of the list. Right then, moving on from that, we have my number 6, which is Second Sons. Now, Second Sons, my favourite part of this episode is obviously the wedding between Tyrion and Sansa. That was fan-bloody-tastic. And I really liked all the foreshadowing for the Red Wedding. However, in hindsight, the Stannis storyline with the leeches and Gendry was weird, because it didn't really have a conclusion, so in hindsight it doesn't quite work as well. And also, I thought the Yunkai plot was quite rushed. Didn't quite hit the right notes for me. But what keeps it this high on the list is the wedding, because the wedding was fucking great. I loved that. And the foreshadowing, like I said. So, yeah, that's my number 6. What is your number 6?
My number 6 is The Bear, the Maiden Fair.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, again, I think this is another really solid episode, and I think the ending is very good. I think this is like the most solid episode with like one of the like least amount of problems, I guess, for me. I think there's like a couple of highs, but there's not that actually many lows, so it's kind of in the middle. I think that's why it's sort of in the middle for me in my list. But yeah, I think it's another really solid episode, and I think the ending is actually really nicely done with Jaime. I really liked it, and the title fit well with what happened at the end, like I was hoping for.
Okay then. Well then, my number 5 is Misa. Very good. It was a longer episode. I liked that a lot. Starting with Roose Bolton at the Twins, ending with Daenerys and Yunkai was great. And the scene with Tywin and Tyrion was fan-fucking-tastic. The scene with Jon and Egret was fantastic. There was a lot of highs in this episode, but at the same time, what brings it down slightly for me is the Stannis Baratheon storyline. Because that element of it was not good for me. Considering how much I care about Stannis' character, it is a disappointment to see it handled this way. But it is a very good episode. Very good. I just think I slightly prefer the ones above it because they don't have as many faults for me. So, yeah, Misa's number 5. Still a very, very good episode. What is your number 5?
My number 5 is The Climb.
Oh, yes.
For the same reasons you said that you liked it, I also really like the actual climb itself. I think that whole part of the story I actually was really, really very invested in. I really liked it, and I liked how it was sort of done. Yeah. I know. Yeah, I also like all the other stuff. I think it was also very just solid stuff throughout, and I think it's again it's another episode where I think
it's probably slightly underrated actually, The Climb, because I think a lot of people bash it. It's actually quite solid.
Yeah, I would say so. It doesn't have that many
it's
problems.
It's definitely a cool down though. It's very mild for a lot of it. But I like the build that it has. It has a nice build to it.
I think this, for me, why it beats the Bear and the Maiden Fair is because I think The Climb is actually very well executed itself. Like the climb of the wall. I think I liked how that was sort of structured together.
Alright then, well, speaking of, my number 4 is The Bear and the Maiden Fair. I just have such a fondness for the way George R. R. Martin writes dialogue and story. He just fully, completely understands all the fine details of these characters, even ones that he didn't create. Like Talisa, for example, because Talisa's character isn't that interesting. However, the dialogue that he gives her in the scene that she has in this episode is interesting, with Robb Stark saying, you know, how can I fight a war when you're sitting like that? And with her talking about running to her mother and talking about how she's pregnant. It's all very smooth, and I like the way George structures his episodes. Also, with The Bear and the Maiden Fair, the biggest part of it is the Jaime saving Brienne from the bear pit, which is a very big part of his character development. I loved that element of the episode. Jaime was definitely the highlight. Apart from that, from memory, there was really nothing to complain about with that episode. I thought it was very, very solid. And it, again, like The Climb, it did have a lot of like sort of cool down. However, it was slightly, I would say it was slightly more on the important side for the characters than The Climb. Oh yeah, there's some really good stuff with Jon and Egret because they've just come off the wall. I really like that stuff. And, oh yes, of course, I knew there was something else forgetting. The fucking scene between Tywin and Joffrey when Joffrey's on the throne in that episode was so good. That was amazing. I loved that. Loved that. Yeah, so Bear and the Maiden Fair is my number 4. What is your number 4?
My number 4 is Second Sons. And it's high because of the wedding aspect. I think all that was brilliant stuff. Like, that was hilarious. Some of the most funniest stuff we've had in the show so far.
It was hilarious.
And I think in terms of the actual drama and in terms of the actual like characters, I think it actually does a really good job at developing everybody. Yeah, I thought it was really good. Everything else I think is quite solid, and the only problem I have with it is the Daenerys side of the story.
What about the Stannis stuff with Gendry and the leeches? I mean, the dialogue with him and Davos is great, but the leeches storyline, did that really pay off?
No, but I think out of all the problems with that, with the Stannis story, that's not one of the weaker aspects.
I would say it's mainly episodes 3 and 10 that the Stannis storyline is a little bit fucked, and also the connective tissue between them. Yeah. Other
than that, I thought this episode was actually really, really good.
Right then, my number 3 is "And Now His Watch Is Ended." Quite an eventful episode. So we have finally, after all the time we had to wait, we finally got an episode based around Varys. That was great. Seeing him tell the story about how his cock was cut, and talking about how, and showing Tyrion the man that did it, and he captured them. That was fantastic. Also, this episode had a lot to do with him and Roz, and how her getting information out of Littlefinger. I really liked that. Obviously, this is the episode where Jeor Mormont and Craster were killed. That was a big moment for the Night's Watch. It sent a lot of it into chaos. And then we also have the aftermath to Jaime's hand being cut off, which I really liked. There is the scene at the Sept of Baelor, which I really liked, between Joffrey and Marjorie. Marjorie's manipulating Joffrey into becoming a man of the people. I thought that was really good. And even though I do feel there was a lack of moral ambiguity around the Daenerys scene, it's still a very well done scene. It's just in the grand context of the story, it's not quite as interesting as I thought it would be. But at the same time, for what it is a very, very well executed scene. Her taking the Unsullied army. And overall, it was just a very solid episode, and I don't really have anything about it to complain, because I thought, apart from that, it was all well executed. I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was also the episode when Theon had the scene where he talked about Ned, and then Ramsay recaptured him again. So yeah, for me, Now's Watch Has Ended was definitely a big point in the season when things started to kick off. And yeah, I really, really liked it. I thought it was fantastic. Oh, and it was also the episode where Marjorie and Sansa started to bond as friends too. So yeah, overall, it's a very strong episode for me. I think it's fantastic. It is missing a couple of elements that could have elevated it even higher than it is. But it is very, very good. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is Kissed by Fire. I think this is, from this to the top, I think the best episodes of this season by far.
Some of the best of the show.
Fire. Yeah, and Kissed by Fire is absolutely brilliant, and yeah, the JB stuff, him revealing his story, is brilliant. Like, it's legitimately really, really great. Jon breaking his vows, I think, was actually very well done as well. Like, that was great as well. Brilliant stuff. Yeah, and everything else was just really sort of stuff, and I had no real problems with it. Yeah, it's a really great episode.
For me,
it's one.
Oh, sorry, you keep going.
Yeah, it's just, this is definitely one of the best episodes of the show.
Yeah. My number 2 is Kissed by Fire. For me, this is like in terms of the characters, this is the strongest of the season, and it's one of the best episodes of the show. I gave it a 10. It's probably the strongest in terms of like themes, if you know what I mean, because a lot of the storylines connected to the whole theme of Kissed by Fire, with obviously the sword fight with Sandor Clegane and Beric Dondarrion, relating to the Hound's fear of fire. I really liked that. Of course, you've got Jon and Egret. Jon breaking his vows, Kissed by Fire, obviously being, her being ginger. Then you've got the whole storyline with Tyrion, Tywin, and Cersei, and how Tywin is forcing them to marry people that they don't want to marry, and that whole scene, that whole section of the episode was so well acted, so well executed. It was absolutely phenomenal. And like you said, the fucking bathtub scene with Jaime and Brienne is legendary. It's one of the best scenes in the whole story of Game of Thrones. I also really liked the scene with Robb Stark beheading Rickard Stark as well. That was excellent. And then the only part of the episode that was slightly questionable was the fact that Loras didn't really mention much about Renly, because he obviously had that storyline with Oliver, and it was Littlefinger manipulating the scenario, which I still really liked the storyline anyway. So yeah, it was pretty much a fucking spotless episode for me, and I enjoyed everything in it from start to finish. And the themes are strong, the characters were strong, and it was absolutely phenomenal. One of my favorites of the show. And the only reason it's not number one is because it's not the Red Wedding. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Misa.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the episode was a really, really great transition from the last episode. I think about those 2 episodes, how they intertwine so well. It's like fantastic. Like it feels like. Obviously every episode is continuing the story, but these 2 episodes, the way they continue it so well and then transition it slowly up until the ending, I think is brilliant. And the only problem I have with it is the Stannis story, and that's it. Everything else I think is actually great. I think every other scene apart from that is great. And I love the ending scene.
That scene with Tywin and Tyrion, though, Jesus Christ.
That's great.
Transitioning straight into the scene with Sansa finding out about the Red Wedding. And like the meet up with Bran and Hodor and Sam and Gilly and all that.
Yeah, every other scene was brilliant.
Yeah. The extended length definitely helped too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that scene we got with Roose Bolton and Walder Frey. Oof. Yeah, you can really see the tide turning after the Red Wedding. It's just that fucking Stannis storyline. That goddamn Stannis storyline. Well, I suppose that means, once again, 3rd season in a row, our favourite episode is exactly the same one. Which is our number 1. The Reigns of Castamere.
Snap.
Not only is this my favourite episode of the season, this is my favourite episode of the entire show.
It's my favourite episode so far.
It's pretty much perfect. Like, it is...
Pretty much.
I mean, I suppose the Yunkai storyline, if it had a bit more development, it would have been a slightly more interesting turnout. But that's more of a problem with Second Sons, not this one. Because the Yunkai storyline with them raiding had a lot of tension around it with Jorah and Daario, I felt. And I really, really enjoyed that element of it. On top of that, with Samwell and Gilly, with her telling him that he's like some kind of wizard, is such a big moment for his character. It's all he ever wanted. You've then got the crossover storyline, and we talk about themes. We talk about, Starks almost seeing each other, like tantalizingly so, with Bran and Jon, and how those 2 storylines cross over is absolutely genius. I love the way those storylines cross over, with Bran finding out he's a warg and with Jon betraying Egret at the same time. It's a brilliant clash. And you've got Arya Stark and the Hound going to the Twins to trying him to sell Arya back to her family. But then, of course, they run into the Red Wedding, which is just an absolute masterstroke of genius. The Red Wedding is one of the best storylines I've ever seen in anything, and I can't praise it more. The acting, the direction, the writing, the music, the just the twist itself, it's so perfectly crafted. It all makes sense, but and it's like if you know going in, you can see it from a mile away, but it's still shocking. And then you get the element of like fucking just the whole twist around Roose Bolton and the whole thing. It's masterful. I mean, if you saw the reaction, I cried, and I've seen that episode like 5 times, and it still gets me. The Reigns of Castamere is a masterpiece. Your thoughts?
I agree. It's a phenomenal episode, and it's one of the best episodes in television. It's so well built up, so well paid off. Pacing is great, editing is great, music's great, performances are great. It's pretty much perfect.
It's the one episode that Dave and Dan have been waiting to do their whole lives. Well, not their whole lives, but ever since they read the books. And you can tell because they put all their eggs in that basket. And it
for sure.
Completely paid off. They made fucking Talisa and Rickon interesting in that episode. Like, it didn't skip a beat. It did not skip a beat. And it's quite a funny episode as well. It's got a lot of really funny humour in it. Especially with the Blackfish. Yeah, I loved it. And Michelle Fairley and Richard Madden, David Bradley, they were all off the charts. Also the actor who plays Roose Bolton, I can't remember his name. Oh, it was outstanding. I would imagine it's probably most people's number one for this season. So what did you think of the story arc of Season 3?
I thought it was solid. I think the overall season story was just solid. And I think it had a really good ending. I think in comparison with the last 2 seasons, it's probably the weakest, but it has probably the strongest ending.
Yeah.
So it's really weird.
Yeah, it's an odd one, because obviously, like we said, it's the first half of a book. Which means, like, I sort of judge it a bit differently, but at the same time, it has to stand on its own. And I think one difference between me and you is I had hindsight for the Red Wedding, which adds a lot of subtext to it for me, because this is in regards to Rob's storyline, and especially with like Roose Bolton and all those characters, this is a very rewatchable season for me, because you get a completely different perspective on every scene once you know what Roose Bolton's doing. So for that element, I think it's a very, very well crafted season, though it's not as eventful as the first 2, that's for sure. But at the same time, that comes at the consequence of this being the first half of a story. So I don't know. It's a difficult one, really. Because I like you, I think it's very solid. But is it phenomenal? In some ways, yes. But in other ways, no. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for the Red Wedding, I feel like this season would be a lot lower down in my estimation.
Most probably.
Yeah. Would you say this is probably, like, outside of the Red Wedding, it's probably the least eventful season we've had by far?
Yeah.
Yeah. This was also quite a character-focused season, though, wasn't it? It was very focused in on those characters, rather than the plot of the series, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was really solid all the way through, but it did have a few cracks. and there were some parts that were rushed, and yeah. But the Red Wedding made up for it in spades. Moving past that, give your conclusion and a rating out of 10 for season 3.
This season was very solid, with a couple of problems, with a very, very great ending. Like I said, in comparison with the last 2 seasons, it's probably the weakest, because I think it has the most exposed problems. Yeah, I can't remember what ratings I gave the last 2 seasons, but I'm pretty confident that they were pretty high.
I think you said you gave season 1 a 9.25, and I think season 2 was like a 8.5 or something. I don't know, not sure, can't remember.
So I'm probably going to give this an 8.25, and the reason why it's probably not like a 7.75 is because of the last 2 episodes are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's probably the only reason why it goes up by half, is because of those last 2 episodes and because of how great those 2 episodes are executed for me with the characters.
So you're saying
stories.
It's just a notch below season 2 because of the last 2 episodes?
Yeah, because one of them is the best episode of the show so far.
I'm very much similar on that front. Season 3 is weird because when I first watched the show, it was actually the first time I started being really interested, which is odd because now I consider it to be weaker than the first 2. But I think it just comes down to the fact of not being as understanding of what was happening when I first watched it. This time round, though, with context, it definitely feels less eventful than the first 2, and that doesn't necessarily make it bad, because a lot of the story in Season 3 is quite strong. It's just not quite there. It's a little bit mild in some regards. However, the way it focuses in on some characters is fantastic. There's certain storylines that were really good, others that were a little bit rushed but still worked, and then there was one specific one with Stannis that they fucked up. However, it is all made up for by how fucking amazing the Red Wedding is. The Red Wedding is so good that I'm going to give Season 3 an 8.5 out of 10. If it wasn't for the Red Wedding, I probably would have given it like a 7.5 or maybe even a 7. But because the Red Wedding is so fucking brilliant, I'm going to give it an 8.5. Which is just a notch below Season 2, because I gave Season 2 an 8.9. And if you were to go off the ratings out of 10 I gave the episodes and sort of average it out, Season 3 would actually be slightly above Season 2. However, the reason why I give it 8.5 and not like a 9 is because when you look at Season 3 as a whole picture, it doesn't fit quite as well when you look at it as individual episodes, if that makes sense. It's sort of the overall story that when you look at all the episodes with each other, it doesn't create as good of a structure as the first 2 do. So I'm going to give it an 8.5, which might sound harsh to some people, because I know some people praise this one to the moon because of the Red Wedding. And the Red Wedding is brilliant. It's just you have to kind of formulate around that, and you have to get all the storylines, working. And I think they worked for the most part. It's just some of them are rushed, some of them are unfinished, and some of them are sort of half-baked. But I would say about half of them were really good, and one of them was fantastic. So, yeah, it's kind of difficult to say, really. I don't really know what to say, because it's kind of... I can't really give my complete thoughts, because we haven't got to Season 4 yet. So I don't really know. It's quite possible that your opinion on Season 3 might go up or down depending on Season 4. It's possible, because they are very connected.
Yeah, most probably, yeah.
Interesting. Well, with that said, what would you like to see from Season 4?
Some actual development of characters that were underused in this season. Stannis, is probably the biggest. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing like what the sort of new story will be, because the Stark story in terms of the war is now over. So I'm looking forward to see what the Lannisters do now and what happens going forward for them, because from their perspective they've now won. So I'm really interested to see what happens next with them. Other than that, I'm looking forward to see where all the other characters go with their stories.
Yes. Season 4 is going to be a very interesting one, I can tell you that. There's, I would say, because you know how with Season 3 we're like, it's all very solid, but there isn't that much to say? Season 4 is going to be very interesting, because it's a very eventful season. I can say that. Because it's the second half of A Storm of Swords. So imagine, you know, when you think about the second half of Season 1 or the second half of Season 2, they were quite eventful. We're now going to get 10 episodes based on the second half of a book. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. I can say that. There's going to be a lot to say. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. But if we don't have anything else to say, we can sort of wrap up.
Yay.
Well then, the next time we'll be doing it, we will be watching the first episode of Season 4, which is called Two Swords. What do you anticipate for Two Swords?
I'm not sure of specifically. I'm just expecting like it'll probably be another really solid first episode. I'm just looking forward to see where the characters are now and what they're all going to be heading towards for next season.
Because what we know so far about the storylines, where they're going. Jon Snow's back at Castle Black, as is Samwell Tarly. Mormont's not there. Crassus Keep's been taken. The White Walkers don't have babies to take anymore. The wildlings are going to attack the wall. Alistair Thorne will be there at the wall without Mormont there to supervise them. And there will also be another character at the wall that you seem to have forgotten was sent there. Then after that, Bran is now going beyond the wall to try and find the Three-Eyed Raven. We also have a couple of weddings to come. We have the wedding of Joffrey and Margaery, and we have the wedding of Cersei and Loras. And now Jaime's back in King's Landing, so what's going to happen now that he's there? We have the aftermath of the Red Wedding. We have Roose Bolton in control of the North. We have Littlefinger going to the Vale. We have Stannis Baratheon, who's going to deal with, now that he knows about the oncoming threat of the White Walkers. He's going to do something about that. We have the Hound and Arya, who have now left the twins because of the Red Wedding. Blackfish has escaped. Edmure's been captured. Qyburn's in King's Landing. So has Brienne. Theon is still captured. He's now lost his cock and he's called Reek. Yara's going to try and save him. And now Daenerys has freed the slaves of Yunkai, so now you are waiting to find out what her next move is. So we got all that to look forward to. So, anything else you want to say? Ugh.
No, I think that's it.
Wow, 4 hours. Jesus.
Yeah.
Alright, well, we will see you all next time in Season 4 for Two Swords.